The manhwa story begins with the main character wondering if this is where he will die, as he seems to have been injured by a wicked spear that cannot be healed by anything except an elixir. A guy named Choy arrives saying that he could have defeated the monster alone and didn't need the protagonist's help, but in reality he was saved by the protagonist. The good news is that Choy has an elixir. The bad news is that he won't give it to the protagonist because it's a very rare item. The protagonist simply accepts his fate. While several windows comment on his death, these are the gods called divine spirits, and they are the ones who give challenges and rewards to entertain themselves by watching humans fight, while the two share this moment of farewell. A narrator appears creatures that mediate the wishes of the gods to humans. He says that the next challenge is about to begin, and the protagonist tells Choy to leave quickly with his pets. The women get angry, but Choy scolds them, and they leave abandoning the protagonist to die. In other words, the manhwa ends here, and so does the video. Just kidding, here falls the protagonist, who reincarnates as a rice ball or whatever it is, apparently. Everyone who dies transforms into this form, and this narrator here says that they will work for them. From now on, immediately they are launched into space, and are given the order that they have 1 hour to form a contract or die permanently in space. The protagonist sees that the Earth is still intact and has not been destroyed, so he realizes he has also gone back a bit in time. He deduces that the monsters from the portals have not yet appeared, and that the chosen ones will be the ones to fight them. He transforms back into his previous body, leaving the narrator surprised. It seems to be a great feat that normally takes an entire month to tell newcomers. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks this should be easy. 1 hour to find a contract, since anyone would want a contract with an accountant. But when he returns to Earth, he discovers that it is not so simple. He can see above people's heads bronze, silver, and gold books, showing the quality of their talent, and he can even read the book to see how much potential they have to evolve. He only finds silver and bronze people, and is shocked as there is only 1 minute left. The narrator mentions that he had high expectations for him, but now with 1 minute remaining, it is impossible for him to form a contract. The protagonist starts to think until he remembers that there were once 3 people called the Miraculous Trio, considered the strongest. He enters the name of the only one without the secret name and is teleported to a dormitory, where he finds a girl calmly eating her ramen. She gets scared and says she will call the police, but the protagonist doesn't even hear. The only thing he sees now is that big golden book she has, a man from the celestial body. Ink finally meets Kang Yuhun and introduces himself, and the Ryum gets straight to the point. He wants to sign a contract with her. Surprise, Yuhun asks if he's serious. Since everyone always said that her skills were terrible, she had already given up on being a collector. The protagonist realizes that she has no idea of her true potential and explains that he is there exactly because of her hidden talent. Excited by the offer, she asks where she should sign, and the Ryum hands her the contract and a pen, but time is running out. He has only 15 seconds. He urges her to hurry as she signs. The tension rises, and she finally finishes signing. But the clock strikes 0 at that exact moment, and the story ends here. Just kidding. With only 2 seconds left on her life timer, the system window confirmed the mission completed, and Hyun remembered the promise he made to himself to live a life without regrets. He told the girl he was excited to work with her, and she simply asked him to take good care of her later. He took out the golden book containing Ryum's past. He opened it, and what he found was shocking. She didn't have one, but 3 main character specializations, and only one was awakened. Her power level was already absurd. One of her talents was similar to the tale of Chuck Junkyum with 3 high-level talents. How powerful she could become if she awakened all of them, and the Ryum asked if she was aware of that. Erin, however, still believed her talents were weak. She explained that during training, she was told not to talk about them, but the Ryum remembered. Now we have a contract. She laughed, revealing that the name of the talent was Master of Swords of the Goryeo era, a name she thought was a complete joke, and the Ryum was surprised. He confirmed that she never told anyone else about her abilities. She just said people never asked, fearing he would cancel. She said she wouldn't allow that, but he reassured her that he was not disappointed at all. At that moment, a system notification appeared. He was now an official employee, and his first mission was to attend the opening ceremony. He told Aram he needed to leave but didn't know for how long. He asked what equipment she used. A shield, she said. She explained that since she wasn't good at combat, but was physically strong, she thought she could be a frontline defender. Her instructors even made her use a spear. Anything but a sword. This frustrated Yuri. He told her to listen carefully. Swap that shield for a sword and train tirelessly. Is that all? She asked. Yes, he answered. Only then you will understand your true power. He accepted the mission, and with one last instruction for her to train, he teleported later. Ryrim was in a construction area, sword in hand. She was uncertain. Could she really learn just by swinging this? She had never held one before. She started with some random swings. But then something made sense. Her movements became more precise, more fluid. A natural grace took over, something she couldn't explain. When Yuri finally returned, more time had passed than he expected. He teleported to where she was and was surprised by her progress. Her posture was firm. She was already performing complex movements without any lessons. He smiled. No wonder one day she would be known as the Empress of the Sword. His sudden appearance startled her. "How long have you been there?" she shouted. He just said he didn't want to interrupt. She replied that she wasn't even training seriously yet. His next mission appeared on the system screen. The mission of his life: he had to collect stories and build a library. To earn a promotion, Harem, unable to see the screen, asked what he was doing. "I'm going to build a library," he said, surprised. She asked, "Isn't that the first thing a clerk does?" He explained that he had just started the job, but she didn't seem to believe him. He said he had nothing to gain by lying to her, and then a text box appeared in front of him so he could choose the name of his library. Looking through a list of suggestions, he saw that all were terrible and got annoyed with the prideful junk that made that list, and the Ryam asked if he really had to choose one of those names just to attract the attention of the spirits. One name caught his attention, and he opened it to see. Looking at the library, he saw a collector being crushed by several small monsters while receiving countless comments telling him to give up. That story did not please any of the divine spirits, and the river understood the problem of making a contract with a bad collector. He decided to leave the name of the library for later, but started creating his own immediately. He asked Irin if she was ready to swing the sword a bit, and she seemed confused. The two teleported to another location where there was a portal. The girl asked what place that was, and he explained that it was the entrance to the world of thoughts, a place of myths, legends, and stories contemplating the portal. Mac explained the role of the narrator to tell stories to the higher spirits, and that's how they did. Turning to Riram, he said he had a question to ask. She knew what the implications of the stories they were about to show were. She asked if it was the story of a main character, and he said it was something like that, but each story could belong to a different genre. Even so, among so many stories, there was one genre that really stood out. Above the rest, the heroic tales standing before the portal, and the rhyme said that from now on she would be the protagonist of heroic tales. She still doubted that, but he said he would help. The scene changed, and now they were on a mountain of kobolds. The MC asked if she knew anything about them, and she said she knew a little by opening the system window. The protagonist then opened his library immediately. Some high spirits began to enter, already interested in seeing what kind of stories would be told there. He started talking to them. Introducing himself soon, he realized they were the same ones who had been leaving negative comments. In the other library started to make negative comments, even before the story began, which made the MC realize they were there just to see him fail. Taking a step back, the MC explained that he would go to the observation room to tell his story, so she would have to fight alone. This scared the girl, trying to calm her down. He said she would do well. She just needed to swing the sword the same way they did before. In the next moment, two monstrous feet appeared. Ryram was terrified and started screaming, but the MC told her she could do it. She just needed to believe in herself. Nervous, she said that even if he said that she was still scared, then the monster prepared to attack. While she whined in fear, the kobold wasted no time and took its first strike while Yera managed to awkwardly dodge. Throwing herself to the ground, the kobold launched more attacks and the girl began to scream for help because she was very scared. She stumbled and fell backward, which ended up saving her from a horizontal blow that would probably have split her in half. Negative comments from the spirits began to appear, saying they hoped she would go straight to the grave, leaving her completely paralyzed. Voices began to echo in her mind, and we saw a flashback where people mocked her abilities. And her brute strength, laughter, and sarcastic comments came her way, saying she didn't even have the ability to make a contract with an accountant. She started to cry with those memories, holding her shield as if it were some kind of protection against those bullies. At that moment, she was sitting in her room, looking at the shield on her bed, too depressed to even want to go outside. Relin began to wonder if she had what it took to continue on this journey, or she would run back to the present. She was still frozen on the ground. Paralyzed by her memories, the sword lightly cut her arm, drawing a little blood. But her motivation had changed. She no longer wanted to run away. If she ran away again, she would truly be a useless person, even in that state of poverty. She had to do something because he had found that box that appeared, saying that he wanted to make a contract with her. If she ran away, she wouldn't be able to face the Lord and Riam. Gripping her sword firmly, she realized that no matter what happened to her, she would never again be as cowardly as she had just been. Watching that scene with nervousness, the protagonist shouted her name. He warned her to dodge the kobold's attack, since she seemed to be standing still, looking down, just waiting to be cut into pieces. But in the next moment, as she lifted her gaze, we see her eyes shine, and we all know that when the eyes shine, things are about to get serious. Raising her sword above her head, she managed to parry the kobold's attack with incredible strength. The sword didn't even tilt from the horizontal power. Looking up, blood in her eyes, hatred fueling her strength, she delivered an incredible blow, defeating it instantly. The divine spirits were completely stunned. With everything that had just happened, even the master of ceremonies couldn't believe what he was witnessing. On her knees after finishing the battle, Rihim only thought that she would never run away again. She would never be afraid again, and Hyun was satisfied. This was the true Gang Rihim. This was the correct way to wield a sword. A yellow light emerged from the body of the kobold, slowly making its way to the kobold girl's armor, and a system message informed that she had won 7 points. Shocked, she finally realized what she had just done. While celebrating shyly, the protagonist appeared in the system window and congratulated her on her achievement. The problem was that her fight was not over yet. New enemies were emerging to avenge their fallen comrade. As the battle continued, he explained to her that this world was full of things that could bring joy, so she shouldn't stop here. It would be much better if she became more ambitious and desired more. Meanwhile, several donations began to arrive for her. She could really be like this, Riley replied. Yes. Now she was much more confident in her ability, and I am even excited to see what happens to her now. The kobolds attacked in groups, but the girl wasn't intimidated. She drew her sword again, ready to take them down. Impressed, Mac checked the viewer data in his library with stories of Rehim. It had already gotten more than 15 views in less than an hour. Actually, I was mistaken. The one watching this was another employee who was impressed by Yu Hyun's results. Her name was Taoden. He was impressed and at the same time skeptical. This shouldn't be possible. Even though Yu Hyun had received help from a department thinking that Yu Hyun must be using some kind of dirty trick, Taoden decided to analyze this case and see what was really happening. Opening the collector's viewer window, he was simply speechless. Stammering, he began to wonder who that woman was. She wasn't wearing protective gear and her sword was extremely ordinary. After seeing all kinds of collectors, this was the first time he saw a common trend. She was getting stronger by the minute. The kobolds, realizing they couldn't handle Rerim, started crying and fleeing, and the MC noticed that she had become much stronger. Very quickly convinced, he began to ask the divine spirits what they thought of Rerim, but told them that this was still not all she could do. She could still do much more than just that. The donations didn't stop. She was receiving thousands of points. Riley called me by him and he asked what she wanted. She asked what that was. She was standing in front of something red like a fence, and he informed her that it was no longer the cultivation area. This was something the collectors had agreed to create, so they could accumulate points more consistently, she said. She understood, but she already tightened her hand on the sword. The senior watcher, observing the scene, was impressed to see that she had already reached the frontier in her first cultivation attempt, and John asked if she was disappointed with anything. She replied that yes, now that it was all over. She felt a bit frustrated. The protagonist made it clear that it wasn't over. Now that they had come this far, they could go all the way under his guidance. She would cross the frontier and clear that entire mental domain, because they could be permanently erased once cleared. Clearing a domain like that makes another one appear. Elsewhere, few have the courage to finish these mental domains. Due to lack of skills, that was exactly why they created the frontier and avoided clearing these mental domains. Rerim asked if everything was really okay, and he said she could blame him if something went wrong. Besides that, she didn't exactly seem like someone who wanted to stop there. Excited, she asked if it was that obvious, and he confirmed. The divine spirits agreed too, because they were loving what they were seeing, and she decided that she would clear the entire domain as he instructed. While the MC was causing a commotion to gather support for Rerim, the lizard-faced cashier was incredulous with what she was about to call. Rerim prepared to attack, but he didn't believe it. That she had the power to destroy the edge. A protagonist should never give up on their goals. Rerim only took a leap while she advanced with everything she had. More donations came to her, because that is what it meant to be a true heroine. The lizard box was desperate. Things were unfolding in a completely different way than usual. She had already reached 20 spectators in the past. The story was full of adventures, but the collectors chose the easier path, which made the divine spirits lose interest. Because of this, they decided to unleash an apocalypse just to try to get an interesting story. And the river knew how that world would end, so it was determined to create a different future from that. In its past life, this change would not come from external intervention, but from humanity itself. These were the chronicles of the Sword Empress, and they had reached 25 viewers. In that story, the protagonist appeared before her again, congratulated her for reaching the deepest point of those minds. She was happy to see him, and everyone already knows if she healed, it's because she's in love. But all he noticed was that she was no longer afraid. They said they were almost there. He recommended that she take a break, and she agreed, sitting down and admitting she was already getting tired. And John noticed that despite her skills, her body still couldn't keep up. She needed to become more resilient. He asked what she thought about fighting with a sword, and she immediately replied that it was the best thing ever, and that she should have started with that. No kidding. Looking at her book, she noticed it was shining more than usual. What she had achieved today must have changed something inside him. He didn't intend to check now, so he said the kobolds from before would be waiting for her in a group. At the end of this mental domain, they probably had a leader since their movements were so well coordinated. Her face didn't seem nervous, and Mac asked what she planned to do if she wanted. They could stop right there. She chuckled and asked if he was joking, but he wasn't. Getting up, she said she would finish everything because that was her ninja way. There was no way he could play the fool after everything that had happened. He said he wouldn't do that, since he takes responsibility for his words, and asked if they could go now, to which she replied yes. and Ian was smiling slightly because he could see that now she was much more confident and he wouldn't need to hold her or anything like that. The warning was clear. This would be dangerous. So she needed to have a clear goal in mind. He asked if she knew how to clear domains and she said yes. That would be simple. The condition for clearing was an invasion and the best way was to defeat everyone, but she would need to focus on the leader first. There were several ways to clear a mental domain, but in this one, she only needed to defeat a specific monster, and this made her very excited. The girl was already heading towards the boss and even singing, but the master of ceremonies asked her to wait. She needed to change weapons first. She asked why, but when she looked at her sword, it was completely damaged. Any impact would destroy it completely. The girl started to cry and sob desperately, and the Mac said she had held up well for a beginner's sword. Trying to calm her down, he opened the shop window and said she had accumulated a lot of points along the way and showed her the best options to choose. She complained about the price of the swords. It was all she had earned so far, but there was no choice. She spent everything on one of them. The sword appeared at her side. It looked like a rapier or maybe a katana. The curved blade left me in doubt, and Rian praised the sword, but she was still crying over her lost points. And he said she could earn more now, so it was time to go. The kobolds were waiting for their arrival. The leader watching and waiting with his subordinates. Riram had already arrived, saying it was their fault. She had to change swords, since the first one had broken, sweating with fear. The kobolds noticed Riram approaching. She was a real threat they had never faced before. Charging against the monsters, the girl shouted that she had to spend all her savings on a new sword. Because of them, with an extremely powerful strike on the ground, an explosion was created. Throwing several monsters aside, Riram shouts that everyone there is already doomed and begins to dismember many of them. While shouting about having wasted her points, the hatred was visible in her eyes, and she turned to attack the boss in a leap. It's amazing what losing money does to people's minds, crying in despair. The kobold boss starts to scream, but it was already too late with a single blow. Riram removes his head from the rest of his body, ending that domain. Once and for all, the scene changes to a cafe, where the girl is eating a cake so delicious she could hardly believe it really existed. The protagonist asks if it was really that good, while drinking his coffee, and she confirms yes, she had never eaten anything so good in her life. And Rian thinks it was an exaggerated reaction, but it's understandable considering she spent the last few years living on cheap ramen. He said she could eat that every day if she wanted. As long as she continues earning as many points as today, she just needs to be careful not to gain weight, changing the subject. She asks what he meant when he said he knew what that talent of hers from the era Goriel really meant, and Rian asks if she knows someone named Chuki Jung. She makes a face as if she didn't. He learned that Jung Yang was an ordinary soldier, nothing more than a low-level civil servant. However, one day he scaled the walls of the castle that were under the control of the Yuding tribe and simply cleaned the place. He not only defeated the enemies around him on his own, but also defeated, mercilessly, tens of thousands of them there. A rumor spread that he had surpassed human limits, which earned him the nickname Master of Swords. Of the era, Goriel Ririn is impressed with the story, but asks why she has never heard of him before. The Mac replies that his friend's name was strange. She becomes even more curious, and asks what his name was, but the Master of Ceremonies refuses to answer. It's Voldemort or something like that. She insists that he tell her, and the River feels embarrassed and asks her to stop because he is starting to feel uncomfortable, and will report her for harassment if she wants to know about him. She should look for herself. She picks up her phone to search, incredulous that the name could be so bad, but upon seeing the name, she turns bright red, deeply embarrassed. Saw in the comments that it was the Korean version of King, size D furious. She throws the phone at the protagonist's head, calling him a pervert and saying that she is the one who would file a harassment complaint. The protagonist says that even if he were erased from history because of his name, that wouldn't diminish his value as a warrior or his strength. Excited, Ryan asks if that meant her ability was considered special. This somewhat childish attitude makes the protagonist wonder when she will finally become the true Empress of Swords, as she was in her past life, grabbing him by the arm. He said he had no time for idle chatter. It was time to put their plans into action. She follows the Meg, asking what he meant, and he said they needed to work on her image, but she complains that she hadn't finished her cake yet. Riram asks the Mac if he really thought everything was fine, and he said it was perfect in his opinion, and asks her to review her instructions. Don't laugh stupidly and be careful with your behavior. In front of the divine spirits, he nods and says it's time to go. The spirits begin to enter the room, and he already notices that there were more people than in the first story. Some spirits were surprised. The reactions varied in every possible way, and this leaves the protagonist curious. He finally understands why they were like that. They had never seen the Kangareerum dressed properly before, and she looks stunning. The Mac thinks that if you conducted a survey asking what the most important characteristic in a character is, most would say strength. However, if you ask what the second most important characteristic is, the answers would vary more. But in his opinion, it was appearance. He knew she could attract much more attention by being beautiful, and he was right before going to the next domain. She had something to learn. He hands her something, and that is the story he bought earlier. and asks if it was the first time she saw it. She said yes, despite her excellent talents. She still needed to learn how to prepare for each mission, and this would help her. The girl thanked him for that. She started to absorb the stories, and the river asked how she was feeling. The girl said she felt rejuvenated, to which he replied that was great. Most collectors felt bad after absorbing many of them. She was about to ask what kind of points he had used to get those stories, when the MC interrupted her and said it was time to go do the show upon entering the new domain. She asked what kind of place that was. It looked like a maze, but once again she was interrupted by Yuri. Understanding the situation, she began to act seriously, describing the area as desolate and empty, and the MC explained that it was the maze of Crete. There had been several attempts to clear that place once and for all, but without success, and that was her mission this time. She wanted to ask why no one had managed to do it before, and he replied that they had never been able to figure out the conditions for completion for that place. Walking through the corridors, she started to see several bodies of people who had passed through there before but got lost inside the maze. The girl became desperate, but the MC asked her to be quiet. He explained that those bodies belonged to people who had recently entered. Over 100 people were already watching her story. Even counters were watching. He was gaining a lot of engagement. The MC understood that the counters were trying to steal ideas from the newcomer, but he didn't care. His goal was to win loyal fans for both him and the river. He took a spool of thread and handed it to Rim. She asked why she needed to use that thread there. Mazes are complicated, and that one in particular was worse. In the legend, to use the thread not to get lost, so she should do the same. As his last words, he wished her luck. Before teleporting to the viewing pyre of the story, the system appeared to her and explained that she just needed to move forward without looking back, as if it was nothing more than a basic task. She accepted the challenge and began to unravel the thread while various donations were already coming in, all from someone named X. Rim walked through the corridors among many bodies, unraveling the thread and leaving a trail so she wouldn't get completely lost. And the river noticed that even her mental resilience was higher than average. She wasn't panicking even in that complicated situation. Turning the corner, she began to observe the area more carefully, but without losing her composure. Finally, she managed to find what seemed to be the center of the maze. Could the boss of this place really be the Minotaur from Greek mythology? A light began to shine from that portal, and Hyun asked her to wait a moment. Unfortunately, it was already too late. A Minotaur at least 5 meters tall was already standing in front of the girl, snorting and ready to attack. The monster let out a deafening roar. Its hand was already coming down directly towards Yerim, ready to crush her, but even so, she didn't seem nervous. Watching everything through the system screen, he saw the monster deliver a massive blow to the ground. The only doubt was whether Yerim had also been hit. There was too much dust in the area to know if she was hurt, but while the Minotaur stared intently at the girl, he realized something too late. Her sword had already cut into his chest, and now she was behind him in an attacking stance, mercilessly slicing the monster. She said that tonight's dinner would be bull's head soup. What a humiliation for the Minotaur. The divine spirits asked what the hell bull's head soup was, while the MC got annoyed with her for using such cliched phrases, and the Riem shouted at her that the Minotaur was much stronger than a kobold. Its skin was much thicker and more resilient, so taking it down with a single blow would be much harder. She should use a hit-and-run strategy, the MC kept shouting, but apparently, she wasn't listening to his instructions. She didn't seem to intend to back down. She skillfully dodged the monster's attacks while it continued to bleed heavily. The monster fell to its knees, and Riem landed on the ground, right in front of it, and the Riem looked at the screen, terrified. The girl's sword began to shine with a beautiful shade of green. Kang Yuhun learned to use the Aura Sword, also known as the Aura Blade, a skill that only those at the top can use, allowing them to imbue their weapons with ki, to wield them at maximum power. Most collectors do not have the ability to learn this technique by themselves. They can only acquire it through stories. That monster's girl had already fully developed it on her own. The protagonist truly found a precious gem in her. Rim prepared her strike, and the two monsters screamed at each other as she advanced to cut the Minotaur in half. I think the sword slices vertically through the center of the monster's head, the one with horns, not the one in a dress. A massive explosion followed her attack. Her talent was simply unbelievable. Cut in half, the monster lay several meters away from the girl, inside a crater formed by her Aura Sword technique. She observed her victory, still holding the sword in one hand while wiping away the sweat. We saw that several donations had come in for her, especially from that guy XTER Rays. He must be a big fan of hers, and Hyun was shocked he didn't have to do anything. Besides watching the massacre, their subscribers had doubled and were growing rapidly, and he caught my attention to the MC saying that something seemed strange. He asked what happened. She said she defeated the monster, but the domain had not yet been cleared, and the divine spirits were wondering why it still wasn't over, teleporting next to her. The MC explains that the domain really hadn't finished. She gets scared by this answer, speaking both to the spirits and to her. He explains why this maze was never completed even after the boss was defeated. This maze doesn't end just because you defeated the Minotaur. He remembers that even in his past life, many people had won, yet none of them ever managed to finish the maze, and that's why no one could figure out its rules. One day, a digger managed to clear the maze, and thanks to him, the protagonist knew how to complete it. The condition was to get out of it. Rierim said she could use the thread to go back, but that was the entrance, not the exit. The MC explains this, and she asks where the exit is. Looking up, the MC says it's up there. Rierim asks if he is talking about the ceiling of the maze, and he responds with another question. She knows the legend of Daedalus. She says yes, he was a brilliant inventor who created labyrinthine structure, but someone managed to escape from it, which was not supposed to happen. The girl asks if he is talking about Theseus, and the MC says yes, because Daedalus taught him to use the thread. King Minos, in revenge, imprisoned Daedalus and his son inside that place, and yet, the inventor found a way to escape with Icarus, showing a feather to Rierim. The MC gives her a hint on how she could escape, and she gets very excited after discovering there were many feathers scattered around that place, and she runs to gather them. She returns with several in her hands, which also makes the MC excited, throwing them in front of him. She said she thinks this amount should be enough. Immediately, the feathers start to shine as they fall to the ground. In the next moment, a pair of wings appears on her back. She had received Icarus's wings, which allowed her to fly once a day, an extremely rare item. She was still stunned by all of this, but the MC brought her back to reality, reminding her to use the wings to get out of there before leaving the maze. Rierim said she was very lucky. Countless donations came to her along with congratulations for doing everything alone. Back at her home, she asks him what he thinks of her now because her self-esteem was up high. The MC compliments her, but she wants more. The girl celebrates the victory and keeps asking if she looked pretty now, but the MC told her to stop because he didn't seem interested in that he wouldn't give up, and says he can't pretend he wasn't affected by her beauty. Not even the divine spirits could resist. This makes the MC angry. He shouts that if she doesn't stop, he will hit her, and the girl starts crying, saying that he is mean, abandoning the silly conversation. He asks if she has been to the association. She said not yet, because he was asking. He said it's time to level up her class. She needs to advance to higher classes if she wants to earn more money. She quickly gets excited. Flying out the window, she shouts that she will take care of this immediately, but the MC tells her not to waste her daily flight on something so trivial. He's going with her, so they won't take advantage of her at the association. Upon arrival, no one seems to recognize her as a collector. Everyone who saw her was impressed by her aura. She no longer looked like an ordinary collector, but rather someone above everyone else. She walked confidently through the place. Next to the master of ceremonies, and people also thought she was very beautiful, and the river warned her not to even think about using her wings in that place, and with a guilty look, she said she never thought of doing such a thing. At the counter, a clerk began to speak with them, asking how he could help, and the master of ceremonies noticed that he was being dominated by her aura. The master of ceremonies replied that they were there to claim the rewards for clearing a mental domain, while the Rierim was only thinking about what she would have for dinner tonight. Whispers could be heard around. People were incredulous that someone could have completed a mental domain even after all the rumors. They were irritated by the closures of the domains. They wished for the downfall of the master of ceremonies and Rierim because of their supposed selfishness, although they had no idea who they were dealing with. Curious, the clerk asked if there was anyone else with them in that domain, and the river replied no, she had cleared everything by herself. Many there did not believe, and even shouted that she was lying, but the clerk asked what her class was, and the river replied that it was class 9. Nervous, the clerk asked them to wait a moment while he contacted the person in charge, and they went to the waiting room. The whispers continued. No one believed that a single person, especially someone from class 9, could complete a mental domain. He looked at her worried, but felt more at ease, realizing that she didn't seem to care much about it. A giant of a man, at least 2 meters tall, and over 200 kilos of pure muscle, called the MC and Yaron artists and liars, bending down to get a better look at the girl. He began to belittle her, as if she could never have cleared a domain on her own, and tried to intimidate her. Yaron just watched him expressionless, not even interested in responding to this guy. This made the hardhead even more irritated, thinking that a mere class 9 was ignoring him, so he tried to provoke her, more to see if she would react. No response came from the girl, who continued to watch him without paying attention. The provocation backfired, and the man began to shout at her for ignoring him, and the MC said he didn't want to talk to him. He turned his attention to the MC and asked who the hell he thought he was, just a manager. But Rierim said she preferred to call him her colleague. Even more irritated, the man shifted his target to the MC and told him to leave if he didn't want to get beaten up, but the MC remained unfazed with a sarcastic smile. The MC asked what would happen if he didn't leave. Totally annoyed, the big guy launched an attack and tried to punch the protagonist right in the face, but he warned him to be careful with Rierim. The man didn't listen and charged at the protagonist. At that moment, his giant arm was grabbed by a much thinner but stronger one. Turning his attention to Rierim, the man asked what to do now. Was it better for her to let go of his arm, or would there be consequences? Little. He knew the consequences would be for him. Everyone looked shocked as Riram knocked him to the ground. It was such force that he broke everything. He was unconscious, and the girl just stood there watching. A scene very similar to that of the Minotaur if you pay attention, and Riram said she had warned him and crossed her legs. Unconcerned with the whole scene, he had told the guy to be careful, and now we saw that Riram finally lost her patience. It's interesting to see how she has two sides to the story. I was wrong, guys. He hadn't fainted, but apparently had no strength to get up or understand what had just happened. Looking at her, he was in disbelief for having been so easily defeated by a woman. What a foolish macho. Riram, you can take him out. He tried to get up quickly and charged at her. But she didn't lose her composure and just watched. The next moment. The spectators were even more horrified. When she threw him to the ground again and finished with an arm lock, everyone was shocked that a Class 7 collector had been so easily defeated by someone from Class 9. The man hadn't given up. He was still conscious, and if he was awake, he could still take a beating. He was furious after being beaten up twice. Watching the Master of Ceremonies, he finally realized that this was that damn manager's goal all along, getting up and releasing pressure throughout the room. With his aura, he began to shout and curse at the MC. And finally, Riley reacted differently. And Ryam also realized that those were aerial martial arts and stood on alert. He wasn't as weak as they thought. The association's floor began to shake even more, which left the other ordinary people in despair. Begging them to stop, he ignores them and starts yelling even louder at the protagonist, threatening to cancel your subscription. Riley responds to me with more force, stepping harder on his back and pinning him completely to the ground, leaving him confused, not knowing how this happened. And Rio realizes that she has mastered another technique on her own. In the heavy body technique, she was doing better than he expected when she chose. Suddenly, she starts to blush for some unknown reason, and even the MC is confused by this. We see that people are impressed with her technique and strength and how she managed to subdue a Class 7 collector without much effort. Someone starts shouting, asking what they were doing there, and two men in suits approach to try to interrupt the fight. The MC realizes that the men took a while to intervene, which meant they acted on orders from someone to not intervene immediately. Another man appears, asking if they really looked so ridiculous to the two of them as to cause such a stir. He seemed to be the one in charge, and the river asks if he is responsible for that place. And the man confirms, then asks who he is, and he says he is a colleague of Rierum. She was involved in the incident, but it was not them who started the confusion at best. It was a clash of opinions. The other person started to act unilaterally, and then the girl had no choice but to detain him. She acted in self-defense. The man didn't seem completely convinced, but the MC explains that she didn't have a single scratch and acted only to protect herself and the people around, and the river adds that he should be grateful for the immediate elimination of the threat, which makes the chief agree with him. The people there themselves agree that it was the other guy who started the fight, which makes the man smile, apologize for the misunderstanding, getting to the point that really matters. The MC asks when the person responsible for the rewards for clearing the domain will arrive. The person that the Master of Ceremonies was looking for is the old man, who explains that they are having trouble processing the payment and asks to speak with them privately, calling Rierum. They go to the old man's office while people are still praising her strength for defeating the Class 7, and the river realizes that her first public appearance was excellent for her image, but what really mattered was about to begin. The goal of the Master of Ceremonies was to extract everything he could from the association. While flipping through the old man's book, he knows that his potential was not as great as Rierum's Ansas, but he was also not someone to be underestimated. At the moment of the fight, he wanted to pressure them, but seeing that the situation would turn against him, he decided to change his attitude. Opening the door to his office, he invites them to enter. The MC is already aware that the old man has a lot of experience and cannot afford to make mistakes. The old man introduces himself as Choi Jung-mo. He says that, no matter how trivial it may seem, he is the one responsible for that place. The MC introduces himself and also introduces Rierum. He said he heard that the two had cleaned both mental domains, but the MC corrects him, saying that Rierum did it alone, which leaves the old man incredulous, and the river said everyone thought the same. It was unbelievable, but she demonstrated her skills right there, so that was proof enough. The old man agrees but wants to know exactly what the two want from the association. Seriously, the MC says that all they want is what is fair for cleaning the domain. The association was planning not to reward them for completing the mental domains. The old man's expression changes at that moment. Smiling, he explains that the decision to distribute rewards is exclusively up to him, but the MC knows there is more. He wanted to outsmart them there. And the river said he would be honest. He already had the feeling that the association wouldn't want to reward them. But the old man just said he wants to know how. The MC then tells him to stop being evasive and asks if they really have no intention of giving the proper reward for cleaning the domain. This leaves the old man disarmed as the MC begins to press him to be direct and frank with his answers. The truth is that the government prefers to leave the domains intact and not have new ones popping up randomly elsewhere. and everyone agreed with that, smiling. The old man admitted they were hitting where it really hurt because neither the group, the government, nor the collectors wanted more work for themselves. To be clear, Choy Doyun said they threw water on a situation that was implicitly accepted and asked if they were aware of that, and the river explained that domains exist to tell stories to the divine spirits and please them, but humanity was breaking that rule. The old man disagreed. For them, what humanity was doing made sense. Since a new domain required money and people to analyze, it was a risk for everyone, both economically and in terms of lost lives within the domains, so their position was a matter of prevention, and the river said that their excuses almost sounded convincing, and the old man shouted that they were doing this to avoid unnecessary deaths. He asked if the two would take responsibility for the lost lives, but the master of ceremonies said they were collectors, they shouldn't take on those responsibilities. Whether people lived or died depended on their skills and their fates. Full of anger, the old man told him to be careful with his words. The MC repeated that he wouldn't take responsibility, but the old man shouted that lives were at stake. He shouldn't be so irresponsible about it, and the river remembered his past life, and what that decision from the association had led to the earth. Many more had died because of it. The protagonist said that having deaths in new domains was really a tragedy, but maintaining the status, which wouldn't solve the real problem. The collectors were cowardly nowadays, acting in the name of their own safety. Avoiding any real challenge, the old man asked if he thought he was different. He confirmed that yes, they didn't hide, they didn't stop others, so they were better, and that's why they acted to close the Choy Doyun domains. He asked if he believed they should be rewarded for that. Meanwhile, Riram hadn't spoken a single word until that moment. The old man said it didn't matter what he said, this was how society and the system worked, and that wasn't going to change. He understood this while smiling. The host asked if he wasn't afraid of the consequences of choosing that path, but the old man replied that there were only two people. Ignoring this, he said that in the old man's view, it might seem that way. But what if others decided to act as well? Which others? Asked Choy. Immediately, the old man's face went pale in front of him. Several windows of the higher spirits appeared. The divine spirits were extremely dissatisfied with all of this. While he was still surprised to see the screens of comments from the spirits, the MC took the opportunity to introduce himself properly. He was Kang Yuhun, a storyteller from the Celestial Body Inc. The host was live and everyone was watching. At that exact moment, Choy Doyun thought he was dealing only with some business manager from a collector, but he behaved so humbly. The way he cared for his collector and his skill in handling negotiations was different from the common cashiers, who didn't care about people. The old man was in despair, trying to figure out when exactly he had planned all this, but in reality that wasn't the correct assumption he should be making. The man in front of him was acting as if he had anticipated the whole situation from the beginning, given the circumstances. There were no excuses they could make to turn the game in their favor. Sweat dripped on the table next to the old man. If the association's image were tarnished and bad rumors started to spread, it could be problematic for the entire organization. Desperate, the old man still thought he needed to find a way to escape this situation, and it had to be a masterful exit. He tried to find a solution. It couldn't be that this was really checkmate. Looking at the master of ceremonies, he realized the boy seemed quite calm with everything that was happening. Finally, the old man came to the conclusion that he was nothing more than a pawn in his hands. He had already been defeated a long time ago. Trembling, he tried to lift himself off the sofa, but his legs did not respond to his command, and he sat down again and laughed. He was smiling happily, and Riarino was looking at him, although he hadn't said a single word yet. The MC said he was happy to see that the old man still had good instincts at that moment. He had completely won. Even after all that, the protagonist thought the old man could have been even more reckless, giving him more space to gain more advantages, but that didn't happen if he had refused to back down and fallen from grace because of it. The protagonist could have gotten much more from him, but he was smart. The old man, who probably gained 30% more gray hair only in the last minutes of conversation, asked what the two wanted, and Riarino said he had already made his point clear, and the old man finally agreed to reward them for clearing the domain, which made the protagonist very happy, satisfied with the outcome of the negotiations. The protagonist asks what his spectators thought of all this, and they appreciated the negotiation. Some still thought they should destroy the old man and the association, but that was a minority, who simply had a different opinion from the rest. Anyway, he didn't intend to make his fans unhappy with his story, since he wanted the best outcome for himself. Still, he receives numerous donations. Even if it wasn't a heroic story, it still brought good rewards alongside Riarino. He says he hopes the old man deposits the money into their account by the end of the day, and the old man assures him he will. There was still one more thing, and when he says this, Choy Doyun is startled, asking what it was. Seeing the old man's attention, he reassures him, saying he just wants him to find someone for him. The old man asks who he wants to know if there's someone named Choy Doyun among the collectors, but he said he had never heard that name before. He was really a collector. The MC says maybe yes, maybe no. He still doesn't know the details, but he should be about 18 or 19 years old currently, and he gives a detailed description. Anyway, he would appreciate it if the old man could investigate the boy, since he would like to have some information about him. The old man asks if he knows anything else about the boy. The protagonist says he is extremely arrogant, which leaves Choy confused. The day was still clear, and we see that Ryo was finally breathing again. She thought she was going to die from being so nervous. The MC praises her for keeping her composure the whole time, and she said she was afraid of ruining something, but it was exhausting, and Ryo said she needs to get used to it, because they will do this often, and she asks if she can't just go back to doing what she usually does. She just wanted to stay away from these meetings and eat cake to her heart's content, but the MC said she never could. Explaining, he said many people were talking about her today. She was very charming in there, so she was gaining a lot of fame. Everyone was admiring her. Probably because she was so beautiful and impressive, just like she showed at the association. It makes her blush. He keeps saying that in the future, she will be able to enjoy all the fame and money that will come. What happened today makes her happy and excited about all of this. She wants to go out to reward him with something, but he holds her by the shoulder and says that there are still things to be done. She asks what it is, but before he can answer, something catches his attention. Hiron asks what is wrong, and he says something urgent came up and he needs to leave. For a moment she is confused, but without explaining much, he opens the system window and uses his Genesis system teleport, saying he will be back soon. She is left alone while the MC is teleported to a very high point in the city. Someone appears behind him and Juao asks who he is, but the man does not respond. Looking back, the MC says he asked who he was, but all the man says is that he is a very rude kid. The man doesn't seem to think much of the MC, but says that someone wanted to meet him and asks if he is the new recruit. He had come personally to give him the honor of joining his Pentagram division without beating around the bush. The MC asks again who the man is, and he introduces himself as Jim Peng, his lord. And Ryan asks what he wants with him, which makes Jim Peng angry, saying he is very arrogant for a mere novice. The MC says he has a name and it's Kang Yuhun, which surprises the man. How does he already have a name? It took him 3 weeks to get his, and this kid already has his right after joining the company. Pretending to be superior, he says that the MC's name doesn't matter. He was there to invite him to the division, but Yoon immediately refuses. Furious, Jim Peng asks what he just said, and the kid repeats he didn't want to join the association. He still hadn't understood this. He tries to use his authority over the MC, but the MC doesn't back down and says that it's no use trying to impose himself on him, which leaves Jim Peng confused. And Ryan asks if he thought the MC was already part of some division and says he doesn't belong to any, at least not yet. The man was still furious with his insolence, but the MC didn't let him finish speaking and put him in his place because he was nobody to be a senior. He would need to have a good track record. And that wasn't the case for Jim Peng. He wondered how the MC knew this, but the MC didn't say, and Jian added that he was only there to try to intimidate him in the end. But apparently that didn't work much, quite the opposite. To wrap up, the MC told him to go back to his division and make it clear that he would never join the same division, to tell that to his boss as well. If someone wanted him in that division, they should at least send someone with discernment. Hearing that, the man trembled with nerves at the audacity of the presenter, and he stuttered, but the boy simply told him to go away. He teleported, but not before making a veiled threat against the protagonist. Back where Aram was, he simply commented that everyone there was a bunch of weirdos. She saw that he returned quickly and asked what the problem was that he had to solve, but he didn't say what happened and changed the subject. Now it was time to finally get a real manager for her. Mac and Raram were in front of a building called Disk Management, but it still wasn't the place Jia was looking for. As far as he remembered, it was supposed to be somewhere nearby, so he looked to the side. He finally found the place he wanted. Raram looked surprised. The place didn't look very well cared for. He was sure it was the right place. Mac said yes, knocking on the door. He asked if anyone was there and heard someone shout to wait a second. After a moment, the door opened and a leg in a fishnet stocking appeared. It was a woman who looked at them and asked what they were doing there. The girl caught Mac's attention, but he didn't respond. It was already too late. No matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to repair the broken ties between them. Memories of his past began to return uncontrollably, him running towards a desolate place, his terrified gaze when a voice spoke to him. The voice said that he should stay away from someone like her, someone who had lost her humanity, and that woman was being held by the neck. Dry blood was dripping from her mouth as the voice concluded, saying it was sure it could make him an excellent offer. Another distant voice appeared until the woman shouted hello, and Mac finally returned to reality. He apologized but thought her hair looked different. Still, she was the same person he met in his past life. The woman introduced herself as Baek Soo Ryun, manager of Becca Management, cheerfully. She asked if the two were there to join her company, and Ryun said yes, but only Riem would join her company. Soo Ryun looked at Riem and thought she was really cool and pretty. Excited to learn that a collector like her wanted to be part of her business, Max said there was no need to pretend there, and she immediately stopped acting, saying it was a relief. It was as if a brick had hit Surium's head when she realized that the collector she thought was so cool wasn't that cool after all. just a silly girl looking at Mac. She said she could see that Rian was a collector. But what about him? Mac asked if she wanted to guess. She started to think, and said that if he were a collector, he wouldn't have come with her to find a manager. But he also didn't seem to belong to a clan. Guessing, she asked if he was a cashier. And this impressed Yuri, as even the old man had not guessed on the first attempt. Seeing the expression on the MC, she tried to explain that the collectors have a different time than humans despite the similar appearance at that moment. The little Byexo Rio was just a small CEO of a collector's management company, but when the end begins, this will change. During the apocalyptic events of her past life, she used her impeccable decision-making to lead many people. She said she was very sorry if she was wrong, but he said she was right. And she was excited to have a collector and an accountant in her company. The two had already started to form bonds and smiled. One asked how the two met while the Rerum was telling the story of their first meeting. The MC watched the girl with what seemed like a loving look, interrupting the conversation. He asks if they can see the contract, and she gets even more excited about it, and the MC says he wants to discuss the terms. Rerum congratulates Surium, but the MC says the contract is between the two of them after a few moments. She is already vaccinated, and Iram asks the other girl what a manager usually does, and the MC realizes that they are already forming a friendship bond. She explains that the first thing is to provide support to the collectors, so they can focus on their work, organizing their schedules and tasks. The collector said, "That's quite a lot to do," and asks if she has many employees to handle everything, but she said she does everything by herself. Frustrated, she said she should also be driving for the collector, but didn't have enough money to buy a car after setting up the office, even though she has a driver's license. Surium says he also has a license to operate a backhoe and knows how to weld. Riran asks why. She explains that it was her plan B in case she gave up this job, but adds that she will do her best, and the MC agrees. Standing, he said that Riram still doesn't need her because she still has to make her name, but she asks if she can help with something. He was confident that they would need her soon, so he let her enjoy this break for now, since later there would be no time as they started to leave. The MC says he will contact her when the right time comes, and she agrees, wishing them good luck before finally leaving. The MC hesitates for a moment, but asks her if she has a dream, which leaves her a bit confused in her past life. He asks what she would do when that tribulation ended, but she said she hadn't had one good life before, but if she were to consider something like that, she replies that all she really wants is to make a lot of money. The MC says he understands, and realizes that this was really the Baekso Hyun he knew during the apocalypse. This answer made the MC understand why she and Riram got along so quickly. They both thought almost the same way. Riram realizes this too, and comments that it's as if they had known each other for much longer than just today, and laughs about how strange it is in his past life. And the River remembers that they had met before, so it wasn't so strange after all. Meanwhile, in another office, filled with papers scattered on the floor, we see someone shouting and calling someone a bastard. It was that supposed superior, who was still furious with the protagonist and says he will make sure to teach that arrogant boy a lesson. Looking at his system screen, he remembers that the River was protected by the Genesis system, but there had to be a way to deal with him. After thinking for a bit, he has an idea and realizes that there really is a way to reach him. A week passes, and we see some people talking in a location. It seems to be the Association of Collectors. Riram and the MC were arriving, and people notice that it's them, and start whispering that she had already cleared 4 domains. They were preparing for another domain, and several people seemed to be going together. She asks if it was that dangerous, and it was this, a domain in particular that was different from the usual. You could only enter once every 3 months, and if you fail, you cannot try again. She asks if there was a reason for him to choose such a dangerous domain, and the MC asks if she didn't enter this business to succeed. She confirms that she did, and he says that they both share the same goal, even if they follow different paths. He also aimed for a high position regardless of what his reasons are. They are valid for them, and that's what matters, because they shouldn't have mediocre reasons or hold back. If she really wants something, she must pursue it, even if her bones break and her flesh bleeds. She has the confidence to do that. Before Riram can respond, someone shouts that the domain is opening, and the portal starts to shine brightly. The Master of Ceremonies says he doesn't want her answer now, but someday she will need to have it, both for him and for herself. On the other side of the portal, we see the collectors at the top of a wall, observing an army on horseback advancing. This domain was a large-scale war, and Riram wonders if they will also have to fight. She actually finds it fun. While the MC watches her from the system window, someone from one of the armies shouts to stop them with everything they have while the soldiers shout to attack. This was the Ottoman War. The only question is which one. Since that empire fought at least 5 wars against different countries, the defending side shouts that they cannot afford to lose, or the enemies will breach their walls. Several soldiers were involved in the battle, and the massacre was inevitable. The MC's mind goes back again to his past, making him remember people running desperately, terrified by the possibility of being eliminated. In his past, all he could do was watch what was happening, unable to act. He closed his eyes, trying to return to the present and not get lost in those thoughts. Focused again, he thought he wouldn't let this happen again. It was a promise to himself. Let's go back a week in time to the headquarters of Celeste at Body Inc. The recruiter who hired him was explaining how the ceremony would work for all the newcomers. Most of them were still small white orbs, but they were confused, because the ceremony would take place in unison with the divine spirits. The MC in human form listened attentively to the instructions from the recruiter with a servant's head, who said they wouldn't really find the spirits. They were already in a large hall filled with food, while many of the small orb recruiter enjoyed the banquet, and the river was in a corner motionless, just observing with a glass of wine in hand. He was still curious about how he managed to get into that company. It was one of the 3 largest accounting organizations in the universe. It was surprising that he was there that day. Looking out the window, he could see a gigantic island floating in space like a metropolis. Someone asked the Master of Ceremonies what he was doing there then, and the river looked down. A seer with an orb asked why he wasn't enjoying the party like the other newcomers, but the presenter was more interested in his horns, and the river replied that he wasn't interested, which irritated the other seer, who told him not to act as if he were better than everyone else. The presenter tried to say he didn't think he was better than anyone, but the orb interrupted and said he would surpass him soon. Then he left. He found the orb with horns interesting. But then another group entered the hall and several different figures appeared together. They were from another department of Celestial Body Inc. They were there to meet the newcomers. They could continue enjoying the party hidden from them. The MC realized that they were actually there to evaluate the performance of the new recruits in their first missions and try to recruit them. Their goal was clear: to pick the best among the rookies and bring them to their departments. That place had become a battlefield of recruiters. Thinking about how problematic it would be to get caught in the middle of that confusion, the protagonist planned to leave. Unfortunately, he was spotted by one of his superiors as a rookie who transformed. The moment he reincarnated, several recruiters gathered around him trying to recruit him for their departments, and that made the protagonist very nervous. He said he appreciated all their attention, but was thinking about how he could escape from there. In his field of vision appeared a different person, someone who didn't seem interested in him, and that gave him an idea. He moved away from the recruiters and started talking to that black and green figure, saying that he should have warned him he would be there. The man seemed confused, but the Mac continued his little act. Hoping he would understand and cooperate, the man quickly seemed to grasp what the Mac was trying to do, and joined in the fun, which made him and the river very happy. He began to lead the man out of the room, saying they could talk somewhere else, and the recruiters assumed he had already been recruited. They didn't seem to recognize the man, but that didn't matter outside. The Master of Ceremonies thanked him for helping him escape. The dark narrator showed no reaction, nor said anything, which made the Master of Ceremonies wonder if he really intended to remain silent, something strange, deciding not to wait for a response. The Mac turned his back and said he had to go. He must be busy with other things too before the river could disappear. The man said it had been a lot of fun. The Mac immediately stopped walking. The man said he had made sure that no one could detect him. So how did the Mac manage to see through his nervous disguise? The Mac asked what he meant by that. Looking back, we saw that the man's aura was completely different, and quite scary, with a giant green snake behind him that was very bad. The protagonist realized that the man was extremely dangerous without showing fear. The Mac asked what he wanted, but the man said he was just curious. He didn't intend to hurt the Mac, at least not yet. He asks if the Ryan will answer his question. How did he manage to see the man? The boy said he actually didn't see him. He only saw a book floating among all the counters upon noticing a dark book flying in the air and focusing on it. The Mac managed to see the man who owned the book, and the river explains that this was his ability, while a black smoke hovered very close to him, as if it could suffocate him right there. The man gets curious, and the Mac explains that he has a good eye, and can see things that others can't, and that applies to him too. He was a little unsure at first, but when he looked around and realized that no one else had noticed the man, he said he couldn't deny. And the river said it's true. He was different from the other counters. The man laughed, and said he had definitely noticed that anyway. The Master of Ceremonies apologized for talking to him suddenly, and the man asked if that was really all, clapping and smiling in a creepy way. He said it was fate for them to meet, and proposed a bet to the Master of Ceremonies. He asked what kind of bet, and the man said it was simple. He just needed to guess who he was, and if he was right, he would be rewarded for it. The Master of Ceremonies asked what happens if he is wrong. The man said he would have to take responsibility for interrupting his entertainment by taking the book off the man's head. He accepts the bet, even knowing that the man was confident he would fail. The Master of Ceremonies tries to open the book, but he doesn't have the strength to do so, which makes him very nervous. This meant the man was so powerful that not even he could read his book. He couldn't act beyond his level, but he remembers what the accountant said at the beginning, that the divine spirits would also be there. Knowing that the divine spirits were present, but not in the same room as the accountants, he assumes that the man must be one of the 5 great divine forces: the Heaven of Eden, the Esser of Asgard, the Guide of Hermopolis, and the Olympic Pantheon, and beyond them, there was still Pandemonium, where the highest-ranking stories resided, by its sinister air, by the strange design of the book, and by the cover with a three-headed serpent. There was no doubt. The protagonist then says he is the serpent that corrupts, the red dragon that burns those closest to the light and fell into darkness. The man before him was the divine spirit of the first generation of Pandemonium, Satan. He then lets out a dry laugh, excited. He said that Mac guessed correctly who he was. He didn't expect the boy to figure it out and starts to applaud. And the river asks if he will be spared now. Satan says that this was partially a joke, to be honest, but Mac surprised him. It would make more sense to punish him than to punish Mac. The boy doesn't believe this. He thinks the monster would have punished him somehow. If he had lost, he was a man of his word. Satan then said that anyway. He lost and must keep his promise. He thinks for a moment and has an idea. He knew that the Master of Ceremony would soon create his library, and the Master of Ceremonies confirms that he would, so he makes the following proposal. He will be the sponsor of his library and asks what the Master of Ceremonies thinks about this, and the river starts to consider the possibility getting a sponsorship from such a powerful spirit was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Satan then extends his hand to shake the protagonist's hand, who understands that this would never happen again if he shook that hand. There would be no turning back, but he already seemed to have decided what he would do and extends his hand to shake his. He was still nervous. Was it really a good idea to form this partnership? In the next moment, he makes his decision, and apologizing, says he will have to decline the offer. The divine spirit doesn't seem satisfied but simply asks why he wants to refuse his offer. And the river said that his sponsorship would help the library but would also make him lose his freedom, and he was afraid of upsetting the folks from Eden. Satan then said he understands his concern but asks if it wouldn't still be a benefit for him. The protagonist said that this is not enough for him, and this answer piques Satan's curiosity. He said that the spirits of Pandemonium are incredible, especially him. He was one of the 7 executives, and that makes the MC want to work with them. But there was something more at the moment he partnered with him. The MC could only tell stories of Pandemonium, and the authority over his library would belong to Satan, and the river believed in the infinite possibilities of the stories he could present in his library. The path he should follow was different. That was the reason why the protagonist wanted to refuse Satan's offer. He wanted to follow his own path, and the river said he hoped he could understand. But Satan let out a disdainful sigh, cutting the MC off mid-sentence. In the next moment, the divine spirit began to laugh loudly, finding it incredible that he had ambitions greater than those of Pandemonium itself. The boy got nervous, trying to say it was nothing like that. But Satan told him not to worry. He was praising him because he was right at the moment he accepted Satan's sponsorship. The MC's library would belong to Pandemonium, which would force him to give up his own potential. Satan was impressed that he was refusing the easy way, which seemed foolish. But it was a kind of foolishness that caught his attention. He said he would end the conversation there. He was not ambitious enough to force anyone into anything. The MC asked if that meant he had given up. Satan replied that he wasn't sure. In fact, it seemed that this had made him even more greedy to force him to stay. The MC got nervous with that answer in the next moment. It was as if the boy was just a little toy in Satan's hands as he made his offer once again. And the river replied that he wanted the donations from the divine spirits, but not through such an agreement. Satan said he was arrogant, but would not punish him for it as he left. He said it wouldn't be right to let the boy go away empty-handed after winning the bet. Since he came out victorious, he would receive a gift from him. Soon, he was very happy to have met the protagonist. That day, before completely disappearing, his last words were that he would visit the MC's library in the near future. The river was still shocked by everything that had happened, and he looked at his system window. Wondering how much time had passed, he still needed to escape from the other boxes, so he left and found a library. Inside the company, something he said he never expected to find. It seemed like a quiet place. No one was looking for him, so he decided to kill time reading a book. Someone approached and said it was strange to see a guest appear there. The MC turned to the side to see who was speaking. A very bright light began to shine, leaving the MC even more confused. Looking closely, he noticed a golden book above a very bright and handsome man. It was also a very big book, and he wondered how valuable the stories written in that book must be. The old man asked who he was. Normally, most people didn't show up there, and Rio replied that he was a new employee, and that impressed the old man. He laughed and said it had been rude. His appearance was so complete that he didn't imagine he was a novice, and then recognized who the Master of Ceremonies was. The boy asked what the old man was doing there, and he replied that he was the manager of that place. Rio asked if he worked there, but the old man said no. No one else managed that place, but he had volunteered for the task. Impressed, the MC wondered why someone with such an amazing book is retired. He definitely had an impressive past. The old man asked if it was okay for him to be there even in the middle of the initiation ceremony, and the Master of Ceremonies said he had been bothered, so he ran away. He started to laugh and said the same had happened to him in his youth. This must mean that the Master of Ceremonies still doesn't belong to any department, and Rio confirmed and said he planned to keep things that way. The old man then asked if choosing such a difficult path wasn't scary. The boy replied that he would be lying if he said he wasn't afraid, but he still had a goal, which piqued the old man's interest. He said the protagonist also had a desire. The protagonist was confused, and the old man began to explain that the counters are not born biologically, but are created with some level of skills. However, they are like blank slates when it comes to their desires. Most simply follow what the system and the company tell them to do. This was fundamentally the wrong path because it meant just following the herd. Unfortunately, most counters lack that desire. A counter who is not influenced by others' words, like Yoon, is extremely rare. So the old man decides to show something fun to the MC and asks him to follow, and Yoon is surprised by what he sees. They were in a corridor that stored all the stories that truly influenced the mixed world. It was nothing less than the Caste Hall of Fame of Celestial Body Inc. In all those stories reside the lives of all people. It was amazing to see the protagonist was having so much fun there. Unfortunately, the corridor didn't seem that long, because in the next moment the old man says they have reached the end and the protagonist is confused. The old man said that 30 years ago life had been completely interrupted. He brought the river there so that he could remember that place since it was hidden in a closet, the brilliant stories being forgotten. If he ever disappeared from this world, he would be very sad to know that no one would know to that place, and that's why the MC was there with him. He had been the only storyteller who wanted to visit that place even if it was old and worn out. The MC admired everything he could. The other storytellers are only concerned with gaining points and telling the same stories. Those there belong to a different generation. Still, he believed that one day it would come when stories with that level of brilliance and captivation would truly be needed in the world, and Hyun simply thinks that if Hyun had lived and completed that challenge, maybe he would also be in that Hall of Fame. He wanted to be someone, so the MC calls the old man and thanks him for providing him with an amazing experience. The ceremony ends in 10 seconds. Before going back to the world, he still asks the old man what his name is. The old man takes a moment to respond, but says that if he comes back to visit that place, he will tell his name with a smile. The boy nods as the teleportation takes him back to the land and says he will see him again soon. The ceremony had ended. A voice shouts the name of Ririm, bringing her back to the present. In that moment of war, she seemed very nervous, and the river asks if she can hear him, and she responds yes. Then he tells her to keep focused. Hiren asks if this is really a war zone, and he confirms the siege that signaled the end of the medieval era and the beginning of the modern era and brought the Roman Empire to an end. That was the siege of Constantinople. The Roman Empire was destroyed by the Ottomans in that war, so now we understand what is happening. Ririm asks just to confirm if they are on the defensive side of the war, that is on the Roman side, and the river said yes. He knew it was that place that awakened Ririm's abilities and transformed her into the Empress of the Sword. This event was essential for her nervous. She asks if the protagonist is seeing all of this, and he realizes that her voice is trembling. He says yes, and she asks if they will be able to win. The presenter says that not even 500 collectors could win this. After all, it was an army of 7,000 against another of 150,000. He was also worried. Those latter 150,000 were just the attacking force. If you count the support troops, the numbers exceeded 300,000. Curious, Kira then asks why so many collectors decided to participate, even with such low chances of victory, and the river explains that more than 2,000 divine spirits, they were watching that battle. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to show the spirits the potential of collectors that they didn't yet know, and possibly turn them into fans. It was practically guaranteed that spirits from other libraries were also watching the event. This would make her feel relieved and excited. Everyone was there to promote their libraries, so if they couldn't show their potential, they could lose their audience. It was understandable to think that the two were there just to show off to the spirits, but the real goal was also to clear that domain from her past life. The MC remembers that she also couldn't clear that domain. He knew it was dangerous and said they would just try. The MC's intention was to see if Rhea in the present could clear that domain, since she was already stronger than the Sword Empress of the past. If there was a small chance to clear that place, then the attempt would be worth it. A couple approaches Ririm, asking if she intended to act alone in that domain. The guy looks very much like the archer version of Shirumia, and the girl reminds Nicole of Zeiss. They suggest teaming up with Ririm. Turning to the side without answering, the boy asks if she is just going to ignore them. Nicole from Timo tells them to leave her alone, claiming she has become very arrogant after clearing some domains by herself. Rihim was clear-headed. She knew they probably just wanted to take advantage of her, so it was better to act alone than to join those two. Someone shouts to the group of collectors, welcoming the mercenaries, and everyone turns to the voice. An old man in golden armor was there, clearly in command of the defenses. The man introduces himself as Constantine, Emperor of Rome. He thanks everyone present for helping with the defense. As the man continues speaking, Ririm's thoughts begin to slow down. Even knowing it was all an illusion, the only thing she could think about was how real he seemed. After finishing his speech, Constantine said that the preparations were complete and the siege of Constantinople would finally begin. The system announces that they have only one chance to complete this domain and must defend the castle and win the battle. The Ottomans shout that it is final time to end the war. The two who tried to form a team with Iron take the lead, saying this would be very easy, and advance with a magical strike from the boy. The ground in front of him explodes, launching several Ottoman soldiers away as he takes advantage of the chaos. Confident, he provokes the soldiers to attack him. None of the Ottomans seemed strong enough to handle the pair, and this only made him more arrogant. Watching this scene, the protagonist grows suspicious, feeling that something was wrong with his domain. The boy keeps casting spells, extremely powerful, while the girl defeats several soldiers with just a few strikes. After a few minutes of battle, sweat starts to drip from the boy's face, and when he looks ahead, something terrorizes him. There is still a countless number of soldiers remaining, and the endless waves leave him in shock. The other collectors are already out of energy, and the divine spirits are losing interest in watching the battle. This throws the collectors into despair, and the river realizes that they are tired, because they use everything they had right at the beginning of the defense. On the other hand, he sees that Ririn is still fighting easily, defeating countless soldiers. She is still holding on. Well, curious, the MC decides to check the other libraries. When he enters the accountant's room, he sees many of them in panic. One even complains about how useless their collector is, especially because he ignored his advice not to spend all his resources. At first, the divine spirits start leaving negative comments, pushing the accountants into even greater despair, seeing that the Sword Empress was still doing well in battle. Spectators from other libraries start migrating to the MC's library. Several spirits join his library, and the number of viewers reaches an impressive 512. One of the accountants sees the MC working on his story and gets irritated, thinking that he is acting arrogantly just because he has been doing well lately. The accountant starts yelling at his exhausted collector, telling him to get back to the fight quickly because they were losing viewers. And the two start arguing, and Riem realizes that the tide of war is changing and everyone is getting very tired. Even Riorina was starting to slow down a bit. Soon she would also be exhausted, and this would become a big problem. He wonders what choice she will make when she is finally cornered in this fight, a massive explosion or run after the girl. And Riem shouts to her that the castle walls have collapsed. She turns around, shocked, wondering how this happened. They had used an Orban cannon, a powerful weapon commonly used by the Ottoman army. Now they were advancing at full force. The collectors become even more desperate, not knowing what to do and starting to fear for their own lives, constantly looking at the mercenaries, asking for help. Without them, victory would be out of reach. Riem agrees they needed to protect the Roman people inside the castle, and she turns to give instructions to the other collectors. Unfortunately, before she could say anything, most of them were already giving up and trying to flee before things got worse. The girl still tries to convince some of them to stay before they abandon the mission, but they had already made a decision. They were going to run. One of them shouts at Riem, saying that the place hadn't been left unconquered by chance. The strategy for this domain was to hold on as long as possible and then flee. Riem refuses this idea and says they can't abandon those soldiers. Curious, the collector shouts back at her, saying those people were just illusions. None of that was real. He didn't care about those people. They didn't even exist in the real world, but if she wanted to stay behind and die there, she could stay alone. This surprises her, and she wonders if those they were really so cowardly that they gave up so easily. All of them had become collectors, with the intention of gaining recognition, so why weren't they doing this? Riem stays behind, watching everyone else leave through the exit portal. The two armies were still clashing behind her, while she remains still wondering what she should do. With the recap of the beginning of this domain, with the introduction of Constantine and his request to the mercenaries, shortly after all the collectors were already giving up because of the endless Ottoman army that kept advancing. Everyone fled in fear of losing their lives, and Constantino tells himself that he already knew they would do this and would leave them to die. The great emperor looks at the desolation of that battlefield, aware that he had lived this hellish cycle countless times. Despite this, he knows he cannot stop fighting, so he advances to the front lines with his army. This world was already decided. Even if he were not a real being, how could he watch his people be massacred and do nothing? If that fate was prophesied, then he would do everything in his power to fight and overcome it, no matter how many times it was necessary. One of the soldiers from the Ottoman side sees the emperor and shouts to his companions to attack him and bring his head to the sultan. Constantino sees that his time had come. Two soldiers were already approaching, ready to eliminate him once again in another cycle. In the next moment, something rushes past his face and causes a massive explosion right in front of him. Startling him, he realizes it was Riero who caused all that damage. She was in front of him, but turned away, looking at him with a grim expression. She remains silent. The soldiers remember that she was one of the mercenaries from before and ask if she was Joan of Arc. Constantino asks why she didn't flee like her companions. This war was already lost. Approaching the emperor, she said she still needed to fight and that she didn't want to see him die in vain. Constantino is shocked to hear this. All the mercenaries who made it this far fled to save their lives, and Aram asks if he remembers all of them. The old man explains that he was raised in that place. After all, his true self must have existed a long time ago, and he was just the remnants of that. Riley told me that this isn't true. He wasn't just that. She also thought of them as human beings. That's why she decided to help, and the reason why she stayed. Constantino incredulously asks if she really thought that way, and she questions if he didn't want her to see them this way. Upon hearing this, the old man feels his heart burn so strongly, left speechless. This was not hatred or sadness. Smiling, the old man said he wants her to see them as humans. Yes, what he was feeling was joy. He said he couldn't help but appreciate the fact that she saw them as real people, value, and still wanted to help them. In the next moment, the Ottoman army launches a new offensive, shouting that they found a gap to attack. The saint asks her to hold those men off alone. For a moment, once they establish their defenses, the enemy will have difficulties. Hiram confirms, and the emperor of ancient Rome shouts to his comrades to defend their borders. This gave me chills. Advancing with a smile on his face, Ririn is praised by Constantine as his savior, and the battle resumes. Something catches Uriam's attention as he watches her fight. Ririn's book was turning silver. She was becoming trapped in her past self. But he starts to hope that she overcomes this. That story reached 800 people, and most of the divine spirits were left speechless as she continued unlocking her potential. An Ottoman stands before the girl, yelling for her to go to hell. As his sword comes down towards her, the girl dodges the strike that barely grazes her neck, and her counterattack hits the soldier directly, instantly defeating him. A massacre unfolds at the hands of the girl, and I am writing this script while listening to Ranzheimer. I was deeply moved. One of the rivals of the MC asks why he hasn't sent his colleague away yet, since she's getting tired, and they try to belittle her. They continue their passive-aggressive behavior, until the MC tells them to shut up because they are just a bunch of idiots. The man with the tiger head is shocked by the lack of respect. He asks what the MC just said, and the MC responds by asking if he is deaf and needs him to repeat it. They tucked their tails between their legs and fled. They were trying to steal something from his library or just wanted him dead. Even more irritated, the river calls them trash. Ririn was not greedy like them, and he did not treat his collector as a mere point machine. The MC then asks how they have the audacity to belittle those who are not cowards like them. The man with the tiger head is nervous, cannot respond to the host, and he just tells the cashier to be quiet and know his place. Despite this used posture, it was obvious that the river was nervous while Ririn continued to fight tirelessly, until the last line of defense fell. Desperate Roman soldiers scream that their last line of defense has collapsed. They no longer knew what to do. Ririn appears right in front of them with incredible speed, positioning herself as an impenetrable wall. The soldiers looked at her as if she were a saint. She was determined and thought she needed to stop that army, even if it was just one of them. A question began to form in her mind. Why doesn't she give up? Why doesn't she stop if she were to die if she lost? Shouldn't she flee? She didn't know how to answer that, but even without an answer, she had the feeling that if she gave up and fled, she would lose something very important to her. An arrow hit her square in the chest, spreading blood across her already soaked body with enemy blood. The Romans scream in despair. Advancing against the Ottomans, they were furious because someone managed to hit Ririn, who fell to her knees trying to recover. The defensive force apparently gained new motivation, and the Ottomans launched a united attack. One of the Romans falls to the ground, eyes wide open, but already lifeless right in front of Ririn. She begins to panic and starts to think that she really believed they could win this. Desperate, she reflects on how proud she felt for staying behind when all the others ran, but everything went wrong. Tears stream down her face, and Ryan wonders what he should do. This attitude frustrates the divine spirits greatly. Conflicting opinions begin to arise in the comments. Some say she was brave for holding on for so long, while others criticize her for giving up. The number of criticisms is still low compared to others, but this makes the MC extremely nervous. He considers blocking the spirits that are criticizing but starts to hesitate. If he doesn't do something, his library could suffer still somewhat. He also wonders what he should do. As several comments begin to flood the live stream, he looks up. Curious, something strange had happened. All the divine spirits suddenly fell silent, looking to the side. He wonders what happened to make them quiet, and then he sees the stream, and Ririn is shocked that smiling gaze from the deepest abyss just entered the library. And the MC knows exactly who it is. Satan. Satan asks why the atmosphere of the library suddenly became so tense, and Ririn responds that everyone got nervous when he entered. The courage of the MC shocks the divine spirits, but he continues and says that Satan is late, but things were getting interesting. Confident again, the MC says that things are going to get even more interesting. From now on, Satan donates 1,000 points and says he hopes this really entertains him. In the next moment, the MC is teleported to the domain. He is taken directly in front of Ririn, who is on her knees holding her sword, and Ririn says she is done tired. She forces herself to lift her gaze and meet the MC's eyes. He tells her she can give up now, otherwise she might die here. Praising her, he says, she did her best. But there were things completely out of her control. She agrees, even with a weak voice. There were indeed impossible things. The master of ceremonies then asks if she will give up, but she immediately shouts, "No." Frustrated, she says she knows she's being stubborn. She knew there were things that were impossible for her at that moment. Crying, she asks why he was saying something so cruel. She simply couldn't give up. Everyone had told her that she was hopeless and should give up being a collector. And she had truly considered that, but the MC was different. He said she was talented and could do things that others couldn't. And because of that, she managed to grow. That was exactly why she was there at that moment. Riram said she just realized that this was what she wanted to do. Getting up, still in tears. The girl said she never wants to give up again because she's tired of always running away. And Riam said she would die, and she responded that she knew that very well. Even so, she says she doesn't want to give up. She apologizes for that, saying that she's too stupid to give up, too stubborn at such a critical moment. The MC says he understands, but have you already discovered what he did for her? An Ottoman soldier appears, shouting for her to die while raising a sword towards her. Behind the MC, calling her a witch, with her body trembling. She thinks she needs to block the attack but simply didn't have the strength to move. Was this the end of her path? She starts to apologize to the MC, and Riam says this is good, which catches the girl's attention. He stands in front of her. At that moment, he can intervene in battles. This isn't against the rules. What do you think? The system screen shows a message asking if he wants to deactivate the Genesis system, and he confirms yes. This action cannot be undone. The Genesis system is deactivated, and in the next moment, the Ottoman soldier is already mid-jump to slice the MC in half. Blood splatters everywhere at that moment. With a single movement, the MC pulls a sword from who knows where and eliminates the soldier effortlessly. This shocks Riram. Satan begins to laugh uncontrollably while watching the broadcast. What could be happening in that crazy guy's head? And Hyun said he always wanted to be the protagonist of his own story, regretting not having done so in his youth. The faith his mother instilled in him, all these things were tangled inside him, but Hyun condemned him to a life full of inferiority complexes. His old self believed in Doyum's words and felt useless, which made him give up on his dreams and start working for Choy Doyun. But in Riram's case, things were different. She stood her ground even in her final moments, confident and beautiful. The MC was very happy with her choice. The Ottomans were approaching again, and he looked back, which made her give up her dreams and start working for Choy Doyun. But in Riram's case, things were different. She stood firm, even in her final moments. She held her ground confidently and beautifully. The MC was very happy with his choice. The Ottomans were approaching again, and he looked back. Knowing that out of respect for the girl, he couldn't just stand there watching, and the Hyungwai, his sword, ready to protect his collector. She screams, asking if he has gone crazy. He could die there. But he said that this is what he had to do. Charging towards the soldiers, he tells her that he is as determined as she is and then starts taking down several of them with ease. The system window informs that they had already surpassed 1,200 spectators, and he said, "That's great. Great for both of them." She laughs at his joke about how that stage was a great debut. For an actor who still didn't have a name, Hiram thanks the MC for his help and says she'll leave the rest of the fight to him. Blocking a spear strike, he says he's fine, and the next moment asks to open the domain shop. Most of the counters do not interfere in the situations they are observing. This is the general mindset, shared by both them and the humans, but should they really just be spectators of these stories? There were no rules against taking actions contrary to what many might think, and the Ryam decided to enter this fight precisely. For that reason, he was going to create a story that no one had ever done before and enter the scene. The Ottomans shout to kill the witch. Doing so would give them victory in the battle, but the next moment, something cuts their necks. The protagonist's blade was too fast, and he responds that he won't let that happen. The soldiers are impressed with this new fighter, and the MC shouts that no one will pass him while the Ryam watches everything. Grateful, she begins to cast a spell, saying that he gave her the courage she needed. The courage to move forward, terrified. The Ottomans couldn't handle the strength of the MC. No one could pass him without losing their life. The confident and smiling master of ceremonies says it's because he is strong. Even being just a man, several magical inscriptions are surrounding Riram while she still thinks about how brave he was, giving up his blessing just to help her. That's why she would also return to the fight. A sword is stuck in the ground. It's Yuri's sword. He was also reaching his limit. How much longer would she need, seeing that he had stopped to rest the enemies, advance, shouting that this was their chance to win the battle? But before they could get close to the MC, one of them shouts, pointing upwards, asking what that was. And the river looks back, and an incredibly bright light emanates from Riram, leaving even him impressed. The system announces that she has successfully unlocked the complete union between body and sword. She had a serious expression, and a tremendously powerful aura surrounded her as she arrived at the path of the celestial sword. Terrified by what they witnessed, the Ottomans decided to retreat, but it was already too late. Irene brings down her sword with all the strength she had. Left a powerful cut passes by Yuri without hitting him, but leaves a massive trail of destruction. In front of both, looking to the side, all he can think is that he never expected her to become so strong so quickly, and he feels happy to see this. Constantine appears behind them, thanking for the help. This would give them more time to fight against the constant. Ottomans in the river warns that this is only temporary. They will return and they will fall. Constantine says that they have no more strength to continue this battle. He had lost hope, but the MC said that there is still something they can do. This war will not end like the others, and he knows it. Raising his sword in front of him, the MC said that they need to kill their leader. This is the only way to win. The old man asks if this is really possible, and the river said it seems impossible. But it isn't, especially because they have Regression. At that moment, the Ottoman army was retreating. The big problem with this battle was their overwhelming numbers, and it would be difficult to come back alive from this mission. And Regression said that they need at least 300 men for this mission, and asks the old man if he can provide them, but he doesn't respond immediately, looking to the side. He sees that many men had already volunteered for the mission even before he asked. Even tired and wounded, they still recognized the old man as their emperor. Grateful, he said, that everyone there was, giving their lives and everything they had for the good and protection of their nation. He owed them a great debt. He also recognizes that he had said that the gods would help them in this battle, but that would not happen. So the responsibility for protection was only theirs. Finishing his speech, he asked those men to defend their homeland until the end. Those who joined them for this mission could. It was no order, no demand. Those who wanted to leave had the right to decide that for themselves. Was there anyone there who wished to accompany their emperor on this mission? Kamikaze, he bows with his eyes closed while making this appeal. Several soldiers step forward without hesitation, which deeply moves. Constantine, he thanks everyone who was there. Apparently, none of them decided to flee from battle, and the river then says it's time to go, and they all begin this journey. A large army watches from afar the destruction that occurred in Constantinople. Mermaid, according to the emperor of that era, simply comments that REGRESSES had no intention of giving up. He gets a bit distracted. Things seem different. This time, their reinforcements should have retreated, but there were still some left. A soldier shouts that the Romans are approaching Constantine. Rerum and Urium are on horseback, while the others march on foot. Mermaid asks what they are planning. While some soldiers already seem alarmed, Constantine shouts for the attack to begin and the battle resumes. The archers fire their first barrage of arrows towards the small detachment of 300 men. The shots are coming and the old man shouts for someone. Several soldiers are hit horses too. The casualties are enormous. It seemed like a senseless battle. This reminded me of the 300 Spartans. Rerum screams desperately upon seeing so many deaths, but Max shouts that she must not look back. She tries to protest, but Max says they came knowing their fate, and that to honor them, she should protect her nation and families, not to feel pity for them if she truly feels bad about everything that is happening. She must complete this mission anyway. Someone manages to clear a path for Rerum to advance and break through the army. A spear hits one of the soldiers behind her, killing him almost instantly. She looks back terrified. Despair was starting to take over the girl's heart. She wanted to stop and help him, but someone shouts calling her saint. A soldier says they will take care of things there and she should not worry about them. This battle is incredible, isn't it? Constantine shouts, warning that they spotted the Scipias, a type of commander of the Ottoman cavalry, and that they were approaching, jumping off their horses, and the river shouts for Rerum to do the same. The two fall to the ground, still standing, ready to fight again. They would be left behind. And Max shouts for Yerim to keep advancing without looking back. She has anger in her eyes. The two managed to pass through the cavalry and were heading straight for the Sultan when the Sipa Renota panics. Several low-ranking soldiers gather to try to stop her, but she easily takes them down. Screaming at them, she massacres everyone who tries to prevent her from reaching her goal. Quick and strong, the two passed through countless soldiers. This was a battle for survival, and there was no other option. Their timing was incredible. They were there to save the others. And the river shouts that they are almost at the Sultan, and they launch another joint attack in the protagonist's mind. It was too late to gather soldiers to protect Mermaid. Second, but he sees a shield on the ground and has an idea. He shouts to Yerim, saying he will get a shield and use it to throw it towards the Sultan. She is a bit confused, but he has already picked up the shield and positioned it so she could use it as a trampoline. This was the moment. With a leap, she reaches the shield and the protagonist propels her upwards. She reaches a height that no soldier or archer could match. Everyone could only look up, but open-mouthed as she passed, and the river shouts for Reem to fly, and at that moment, she opens her wings, becoming an angel that clears our vision. I'm moved, guys. Someone shouts for the archers to shoot and try to stop the girl, and they prepare to shoot arrows at her with incredible speed. She seems to dodge the bullets and was already approaching the Sultan to end the war, watching what was coming from above. All that the second mermaid could say was that it was incredible. Dragons were her archenemy. But this moment was worthy of emotion. An explosion hits the Sultan's location. Riorina was kneeling on the ground, with the Mercedes cut diagonally in half. This is going to be a problem, but that's okay. And the river watched the scene incredulously. It was incredibly impressive to witness live. Everyone there starts to disappear, and Riorino, standing, had her grim expression, once again raising her sword. She screams that they won the battle, while the Romans twist and celebrate the victory. Constantine watched in silence. As stunned as Mimi had been, he starts to cry, thinking they finally reached that goal. This is what he wanted to see. Everyone happy in front of him. Rerim and the MC were looking at each other when the old man came to thank them once again. Taking off his helmet, he bows, saying he would never forget their kindness, even if they were mere creations of that domain. The MC disagrees. He was also crying with happiness. He wasn't. The old man is confused, but the MC says they are real people too. He shouldn't underestimate himself like that. A simple thank you was more than enough. This leaves Constantine emotional and happy. Constantine said he would like to reward them in some way, but nothing as mundane as money, so he would grant them titles of knighthood, and the river is shocked by this, and Rerim asks what's happening. The MC explains that in ancient Rome, a knight's title had great significance, and in a mixed world like theirs, it was even better. Being named a knight gives them even more power in storytelling, a gift that not even infinite points could buy in the name of Constantine Dragas. The old man says he will grant them the title of Distinguished Knights, an incredible boost to their abilities. Fading away, the old man leaves his last words, "I wish pure glory awaits for both of you." The soldiers also thank the saint, emotional, and say they will never forget her. They were truly grateful and also disappear in the end. They had achieved the final goal, says Rerim, and the river agrees with her. The girl was emotional. She thought they were going to fail, but they succeeded. The system announces that they have achieved a feat that no one else had accomplished, and they were rewarded with 10,000 points, crying with joy. Rerim sees that their names would be celebrated forever in the mixed world, and she starts to laugh. Several other rewards appear for them, both from donations and achievements. The Master of Ceremonies was happy to fight alongside Rerim, and said that no matter what happens, they will always fight side by side. She smiles, still emotional, saying that this was all that mattered to her. Their names would be recorded all over the world. Everyone used to say they were useless, and that was true for a while, but not anymore. A book appears in front of the MC. His book. This was his first story, the story of the fighter's accountant and his sword empress, the story that would start this world. We return to the office. Bikuya is answering a call and asks how she can help. The person on the other end wants an interview with her, but the company's schedule is completely full, so it won't be possible at the moment. Closely observing, the MC notes that, despite being visibly busy, she is very good at what she does. She hangs up for a moment and talks to Yuri, asking if he is really going to give up the Genesis blessing. He throws himself into the MC's lap and says he will give up so she can touch him, but he really doesn't like it. He tells her to get off him, but she doesn't listen. She smiled and asked if that isn't dangerous, and he said yes, but at least he is with Rerim. Now that they were fighting together, she could consider him a collector too. Rerim seems to really enjoy being close to the protagonist. She starts by saying that the two have a very close relationship, but he hits her on the head, saying he already asked her to get off him, and Rerim asks her if she isn't tired. And she said yes, but she is happy to have worked so much in the last few days. She is still in disbelief that they managed to clear a notorious domain by themselves. She never imagined they could do that. The MC asks her not to accept all the requests that come in, and she agrees. She had already rejected requests from clans, but the press was complicated. They even received some commercial offers, but the MC immediately tells her to reject them unless they are really good. The system opens to show some messages. Several divine spirits were interested in making donations to them after that battle, but he blocks all the messages, no matter how great it would be. To have many subscribers, it was necessary to set some rules soon, so things wouldn't get out of control. Even if things seemed calm at that moment, the MC shows why and makes an apple appear in his hand. Rerim asks what it is and smiles. One screams, asking if it's the fruit of life. He says she knows well, and she replies that it's her job to know, and the MC explains that he received it right after the Battle of Constantinople. Many spirits are shocked to see who gave it to him. It was Satan, and he did this precisely to mark territory and drive away other spirits that could be interested in the MC, still skeptical. Rerim doesn't seem very impressed with the fruit, but Sukyun explains that it is one of the two most renowned fruits in the world. The MC confirms, saying that even though it is small, it is something that it cannot be bought even for 10 million in gold. But he had to be careful. Consuming something like that at such a low level would make his body explode. So only someone who couldn't use it was truly a low blow. A new message appears, but the protagonist finds it strange because he had blocked all of them. The one resembling sparkling lights wanted to have a private meeting with Yuri. He stands up, saying he has an important visitor to receive and needs to leave immediately. The two girls are confused. Before they can stop him from leaving, he accepts the invitation for the meeting and is teleported. Now he is in a very open space, flying as if he were in the sky. That place was certainly different. He has never been there in his past life. Someone greets him, and he turns to see who it is and is impressed by the person, but we still don't know who it is. The scene changes, and we see that stranger, the accountant who tried to threaten the MC, shocked by what just happened to him, incredulous. He asks how the MC managed to defeat Constantinople. He himself couldn't achieve such a feat. He even survived a battle without his blessing. Desperate, he starts to think about how to defeat this kid. Otherwise, the department would punish him. Thinking a little more, he realizes that now that the MC no longer has his Genesis blessing, he could attack him without consequences, even if he couldn't defeat that sword girl. If things happened the way he was imagining, the story would change completely. Laughing, he starts posting several negative comments, bad-mouthing the Empress, and even asking for the MC to be eliminated, since he has no blessing. Blinded by revenge, all he can think about is making the MC pay for giving up his blessing so recklessly. We discover who called Yuri to this secret meeting, and it was none other than the Archangel Michael. He thanks the Master of Ceremonies for coming, who said he didn't expect a direct request from Eden, but had no problem showing up, conjuring a table and chairs. Michael asks the protagonist to sit down, and he is impressed by the display of power. Michael asks if he's not impressed, and the MC responds by asking how he couldn't be. He was someone important who wanted to meet him. The Archangel says he seems a bit too calm, but quickly changes the subject and says he called him there to check on some rumors he heard. Calmly, he asks the MC if anything comes to mind when he mentions the rumors, and the MC seems to know exactly what it's about. He replies that Michael must be referring to the gift he received from Satan. They have always been arch enemies, and the MC knew that, reassuring the Archangel. He makes it clear that he is not affiliated with the pandemic, which makes Michael say that's great news. And the MC continues saying that he didn't think Eden would even notice his library. But Michael says that only fools, they get carried away by rumors after checking things properly. He says he realizes that the MC really has no ties to the pandemic, but there was something more. He asks if it's true that he and Satan knew each other very well. The Master of Ceremonies wonders if Michael is trying to measure the level of their relationship, and the Rio then explains how they met, giving a brief summary of what happened during the initiation ceremony of the rookie accountant. Michael asks if he really gave the fruit of life to the Master of Ceremonies. Just because of that, the boy said that Satan seemed interested in him and that he even had to refuse his offer. Michael then asks why he refused. These sponsorships didn't usually benefit accountants, and the Rio agrees, but says that people have different values. In his case, he felt that his goal was more important than any sponsorship. In the end, this decision only made Satan more interested in him. Michael understands and says he just wanted to confirm that rumor. He said it's safe to assume that he is not on Pandemonium's side after this conversation, but he will take the opportunity to ask him something. Shining brightly, Michael asks if the Rio would be interested in being sponsored by Eden. The boy had already imagined that this could happen. After all, the one who came to talk to him was Michael himself. Not just any angel. Without a doubt, Eden was one of the greatest divine forces in the mixed world. This was truly an incredible offer. However, the MC decides to refuse the Archangel's offer. Michael asks why he refused, and the MC explains that it was for the same reason as before. His goal was greater than any sponsorship. He wasn't interested in aligning his library with either side. Michael asks if his stories would show both sides, the good and the evil, and the Rio said it wasn't that simple. He just wanted his stories to be free of any influence, a story that had never been told before. He may seem arrogant, but if Michael found his feelings questionable, he could simply observe the path he intended to follow. The Archangel was not curious about the direction and outcome of the story of an accountant, the one who chose to refuse Eden's offer. The words of the Master of Ceremonies moved Michael. Even though he was not selfish or greedy, he had a burning heart for good stories. The Archangel asks if he is saying that he wants to have both Eden and Pandemonium at the same time. The protagonist gives a small smile but does not answer, raising. If the Archangel said that Eden would respect his wishes and that his story had captured his interest, then he would follow it closely anyway. He wanted to show his gratitude for taking the time to meet him. The protagonist is confused and asks what that meant. The Archangel gives the same answer that Satan gave to the protagonist at the beginning of the story. It would look bad for Eden not to give anything in return to him with an egg in his hands. He hands over the Mac, saying it was a personal symbol of his gratitude, and then asks the Rhyme to accept him. Apparently, the boy recognizes him because he looks a bit uncomfortable. Upon receiving the gift back to Earth, he shows the egg to the two girls, who ask if he got it from a client. They are curious about what's inside, and the Rhyme theorizes it might be a dragon that will be tamed for him when it hatches, but that's just a guess from him, I believe. Actually, he knew it wasn't a dragon for the angels. Dragons were symbols of evil, but the egg starts to crack, interrupting his thoughts. Iron starts screaming that it was about to hatch, and the three stop to observe the egg closely. A small owl emerges from the egg, but it looks much more like the Philo from Shield Hero. The protagonist recognizes it as an owl, and the girls are already completely in love with it. Eager to pet it, the owl quickly flies to the protagonist's head, which frustrates Iram. She thinks the owl doesn't like her. Symbolically, the creature that represents Satan was a snake and the owls were its natural predators. That was a clear message. He realizes that even the little owl that recognized him as its mother had a skill book that he could read. Ryerim suggests the name Ulu, but the other two think it's horrible, although I admit I didn't understand why. Suryam asks what kind of name the Mac would give the owl. He thinks for a moment and decides to call her Bakio, which means white owl. The little pet seems to like the name and makes a cute face at the three again. We shift to a scene near a portal surrounded by some people who seem to be collectors. A blonde woman approaches and asks if everything went well inside. The hooded man said it didn't go as expected, but it was enough. Something caught the attention of the two who were conversing. Heron and the Mac were approaching that domain and they are recognized. Everyone is surprised by their presence. Their fame had already reached. The truth is, they didn't like Heron much because she ruined most of the collectors' plans by clearing domains instead of just exploring them. They nicknamed her the Farm Destroyer and run to the domain to try to get something before she clears it. Watching the scene, she says that this only makes her want to clear the domain even faster. The protagonist realizes that she had gotten used to the nickname. He asks her to wait and hold it before anyone else for a moment because he wants to make an announcement before opening the library, and she agrees. As soon as he opens his library, several divine spirits immediately start to enter. The number of viewers was already close to 2,500, and he already had almost 1,200 subscribers. The numbers were impressive. Welcoming them, he announces they are in the fighter's library. The Sword Empress and the spirits greet the MC. In response, he had barely started the live broadcast, and things were already getting out of control, people commenting all kinds of things along with donations. At that moment, even Lady Satan, who usually kept things under control, asks everyone to calm down because he had an announcement to make since things had become harder to manage since he started fighting. Some rules would now be established in the library, and everyone agrees. The rules are no clicks in the library, no mentioning other libraries to avoid silly arguments, and hate speech will result in banning. Many viewers complain. One even makes a donation to say he is leaving, and the MC takes the opportunity to block him. Shortly after, most of the divine spirits are impressed with the protagonist's attitude, but it was actually a strategy to put them in their place. A spirit called White King of the Setting Sun makes a donation of 1,000 points and says he will continue donating, but asks the MC to take it easy even though it was a large donation. And the MC explains that rules are rules and there would be no exceptions before he can explain anything else. The divine spirit makes a donation of 10,000 points and asks if this would change anything. Now all the other divine spirits are shocked by this donation. Even the protagonist gets annoyed with this kind of behavior. That bastard was trying to control his library with a bribe. The protagonist looks at the donation without saying anything. He starts to think about the name of the donor. A great power with that nickname. Someone who could donate so many points could only be one person that affiliated with the celestial domain. The White Dragon of the West. He had imagined that some famous divine spirits would eventually find his library. He just didn't expect it to happen so quickly. And the MC said he was surprised that one of the 4 sea dragons was in his library, which makes the donor lift his chin with arrogance. He makes another donation of 10,000 and tells him not to be so harsh when he thought the spirits were talking among themselves to form cliques, trying to be a bit more diplomatic. The MC laughs and repeats in a questioning tone what he meant by moderately, quickly returning to his usual serious tone. He says he cannot do that, which leaves all the divine spirits in total silence. The King of the Setting Sun asks what that should mean, and the MC replies that knows his answer was not clear enough. A third donation of 10,000 arrives with the king asking, how much would it cost for the master of ceremonies to bow his head to him? His pride had been hurt, and the Ryam remained unshaken. No matter how much he donated, he would not make exceptions to the rules he created himself. He could not be bribed with PowerPoints or authority. He would not be coerced, and would not change his decision for anything. The divine spirit becomes incredibly furious with this response, but all the Mac says is that it is up to him to accept this or leave his transmission in the real world. Irin sees a red light appear above her and the master of ceremonies pet and wonders what it was. Noticing the red sky, the master of ceremonies thinks he must be so furious, and his power is crossing realms enough for him to see it suddenly. The Genesis system activates like a powerful red lightning, striking reality itself. As long as this system exists, the divine spirit will not be able to release its power irresponsibly. A new donation of 10,000 arrives along with a message from the Sea King saying he only needs to crawl as he wants. Money buys everything. He continues making more donations of 10,000 points, asking if this is enough, but the Mac does not flinch. Opening the block window, he thanks for the donations. He had made a hateful comment to the cashier, so now it would be updated to blocked by the library. The system reports that the Setting Sun Sea King was removed from the library, leaving the other spirits astonished. But the Mac smiles. He said rules are rules, but if everyone follows them, things will get better. Suddenly, a red light appears again, appearing behind the Mac. A red message screams and calls him a bastard. Lightning shoots from it. The divine spirit had returned. The protagonist is shocked at how he managed to bypass the system's block. To think he had that kind of power, it was both amazing and terrifying. And the Ryam said he understands his anger, but he crossed the line. This leaves the White Dragon even more furious, and he insults the Mac, being banned after so many donations. It was a humiliation on the part of the Mac that he could not tolerate, and he makes a clear threat to the boy. Calmly, the Mac says he never insulted even the 36 heavens, much less the White Dragon of the West. He merely removed a guest who violated a rule. The Divine Spirit yells at the Mac, asking how he dared to speak to him that way. A new window appears. Michael entered the library. He makes a donation of 100 points and asks what is happening. And the Ryam and the Divine Spirit are both confused. Seeing Michael there and the Genesis system is activated once again, the system announces that an anomaly has been detected and confirms the target, the White Dragon, for using an excessive amount of power. According to the system's rules, a standard procedure will be initiated. A lightning bolt strikes the Divine Spirit's window, making him scream in pain. Surprises the protagonist. The system managed to subdue even one of the most powerful Divine Spirits in the mixed world. Finally, the King of the Setting Sun is forcibly expelled from Yuri's library and the system window disappears. Despite the commotion that had just happened, the MC says that following the rules will prevent incidents, but anyone with complaints can speak now. None of them dare to go against the library's rules, and some were still silently observing Michael. The angel had an effect on them, calling Rerum. He said that since there are no more complaints, they can proceed as usual, and tells her that today they will clean another domain. Cleaning another domain like Constantinople would be too much, so today they will do something easier, which leaves the spirits a bit disappointed. He told them not to act that way. They are not entering a mental domain just to play around, and everyone is happy to see Rerum. When ready, they enter a forest called the Swamps of Theodolante. That place seemed very different from what they were used to cleaning, and the spirits agree with the comment at first. They needed to figure out where the demarcation line of the area was, and he said he would make the presentation with Rerum. Before they could start talking, someone calls them, and they both turn to see who it is. 4 collectors were there, and the one who seemed to be their leader asked if the 6 could hunt together. The man asked if it was just the 2, and the MC replied that yes. He said they usually hunt in groups of 6, but lost 2 companions under certain circumstances, since hunting with just 4 was harder. Rerum finds this strange. It was as if they didn't know who they were. Didn't they hear the rumors or their nickname? They were there to clean the place once and for all, so teaming up with people who just wanted to cultivate wasn't the best idea. The girl was about to refuse the offer, but the Master of Ceremonies steps forward and says it was perfect. They were really looking for a team. Looking at the group, she is confused about why he decided to join these guys. Observing more closely, she notices a very beautiful blonde woman with them and starts to think. A stunning blonde woman with a body like that. Rerum starts to get nervous and forces herself to admit that she was indeed beautiful, and the MC had never reacted, even when Rerum touched. She panics, wondering if this was the type of woman that the MC liked. I couldn't stop laughing at the fact that she clearly likes him after the deal between him was finalized. The Master of Ceremonies calls his collector, who had already regained her serious posture with a scary expression. She says it's a pleasure to meet all of you, which leaves the group leader a bit confused by the way she spoke. They step back, saying they will get their things, and the Master of Ceremonies agrees. He will just wait for them. They're satisfied. He looks at Ririn, who is still serious, and she says she understands that everyone has different tastes. She was really irritated. The girl starts crying, saying that if she diets, she could also look like that, but the MC doesn't understand and tells her to stop, and Rio suddenly approaches her. Leaving her a bit confused, blushing, she asks if he really wants to do this in a place like that. She's not complaining, but there were many divine spirits watching. Ignoring the girl's nonsense, he asks her to listen carefully to what he has to say. That group is made up of corpse looters. She hears this and is speechless. For a moment, the scene changes, and we see the group looting a collector who hadn't survived. It could have been one of the 2 who said they lost. Their leader seemed quite satisfied with what they managed to take. From the body, these thieves made a living, stealing stories and texts from other collectors, because they were too cowardly to create their own. Hiron asks if they approached the 2 just to steal their stories in the end. But the MC says it wasn't just that among these looters. There were not only thieves but also some murderers. People who were there just because they like to kill. The girl agrees with what he is saying and says it's probably true, but still has one question. How did he know those guys were corpse looters? Even the divine spirits were curious about this. He remembers that the leader said it was hard to hunt in a group of 4, but their clothes were too clean for people who were hunting. That place was a swamp. The water reached people's knees and any movement splashed mud everywhere. They shouldn't be so clean. What was even stranger was how they approached them, as if they didn't know who the 2 were. Even if they didn't know, it was still suspicious to approach 2 strangers and ask to form a team. It was extremely suspicious. She asks why he didn't reject the proposal. Then he replies, what fun would that be? Then he talks to the spirits about the villains who approached them. Thinking they were easy prey, if such people approached them, they would simply avoid them. What would the others have done in the protagonist's place? Everyone there, including Miguel, agrees that he shouldn't let this go, and that the 2 should crush that group of villains. The plan was to pretend to be uninformed, do what the villains expected them to do, and then attack at the right moment. Wouldn't that be a great story they want? to know if they would really be fooled by that, and the MC answered with another question. Do you know what kind of person is easiest to fool? The answer was those who think they know more than they really do, and who believe that what comes is the entirety of the world, those who are immersed in superiority and think that their knowledge is the only truth. These were Yuri's favorite prey. A brave Bubasur is found and immediately defeated. The leader of the Gus praises Riorim for defeating him with a single blow, and the blonde girl also starts to nervously flatter her. The leader wonders why the Sword Empress was so strong. They simply hadn't yet. Tired of hunting monsters all this time, and the river was drifting away a bit when the leader asked where he was going, and the MC replied that he needed to resolve something quickly. The leader said it was dangerous for him to go alone and asked a boy named Yong to go with him. Assuming the MC was just going to the bathroom nervously, the silver-haired boy accepted the request and said he would go with him. And the river just watched this. He didn't seem like he would oppose. Through telepathy, he warns Riorim that the group will probably act now that they are separated and tells her to stay alert and intervene if necessary. The two moved away from the main group. Yongam seemed uncomfortable, as if he wasn't at ease with the situation. Noticing this behavior, the host asks if everything is okay with him, which makes the boy even more nervous. And Riem says that if something is wrong, he can tell him, but he is already thinking he knows everything. He had seen in his books that the three who stayed with Riorim were total scum, but this boy was different. He seemed normal with a trembling voice. He asked the MC if his name is Urium. Still nervous, he whispers to the cashier to run as far away as possible, and this action surprises the divine spirits sweating in Bicus. He tells the master of ceremonies that the other three were assassins and that he had been forced to stay with them. He even suggested that they eliminate 2 more people. He tried to refuse, but felt that Riem would kill him if he said no. And now in the end, he was one of them wanting to help the MC. He pleads to go, Riem, to escape and said he would lie, and say that he killed him to try to help Riem too. But the MC was curious. He wanted to know why that group wanted to eliminate them. The boy said that an accountant from a famous division had requested this, and the MC became more interested. The divine spirits are moved by the boy because he was truly trying to help the MC and Riem. And Riem is also pleased with this attitude, and Riem then decides to stay there instead of fleeing, which frightens the boy. And the MC explains that he already knew everything, even more nervous now. The accountant is reassured by the MC, who says he doesn't need to worry. He has proven to be a good person, and some are about to ask if the Sword Empress would be okay. When the two hear a scream from where she was, the MC says he thinks it's almost all over, arriving at the location where the other 4 were. The 3 Gus were sprawled on the ground like defeated trash bags, and some are shocked at how she managed to defeat 3 collectors alone, and the master of ceremonies said there was no need to tie them up. Looking at her, he thinks he expected her to pretend to be weak when he told her to fight alone, but she simply followed his order. The 3 start to wake up, and the Mac tells them to hurry up and get up. It's not like they were killed by the Empress. One River was still dazed, but recovering consciousness until he realizes what's happening and sees that Yongun is okay. He yells at the boy asking if he reported them and calls him a traitor, but they say nothing. And Ryam stands in front of the boy who is still being insulted by a Ryam. The Mac steps on the gang leader's arm, making him scream instantly in pain, and says he will explain the situation he is in. That man Baek-won Hyun, a collector of Class 7 involved in the murder of more than 10 people, along with involvement in other crimes and Pause. And Hyun said he had plans to eliminate a nameless man, and the Empress of the Sword wasn't. Now comes the important question: who hired him? Panting, the man tries to act tough, saying he won't say anything, but the Mac asks if he is not afraid of the law and justice. He screams that the worst that can happen is that he goes to prison, and the divine spirits say that the Mac should just eliminate the criminal right there. The Mac says nothing, which makes Hyun more confident in his threats, and he screams even louder. But the Mac interrupts him, drawing his sword. He pierces the thug beside Hyun. Without the slightest hesitation, looking to the side, Baek looks confused to see this, and the Mac smiles, saying that was enough. Shocked, the other 2 look at their companion, now lying lifeless in the waters of the mental domain. They are immediately overcome with terror, and they start screaming, begging for mercy from the Mac, but he simply smiles without saying a word. The girl screams, starting to plead, saying it wasn't her fault, that it was he who made her do what she did. But the Mac raises his sword. Rainer grabs the Mac's arm. He looks at her, wondering if she was trying to stop him from eliminating another thug. Maybe she thought he was a horrible person for doing this. But then she also draws her sword with a diagonal strike. She cuts the girl, who squirts ketchup everywhere, and falls to the other side of a Ryam, also lifeless, and the Ryam watches the scene in disbelief. Little does he know she only did this to vent her jealousy with the girl, and this made me laugh. Very satisfied, the Make said he might have underestimated the girl. Meanwhile, the River looks at his companion, horrified by the scene. Rinya then said she would take care of him. As she approached a River slowly, she said she realized something during the Battle of Constantinople. The only thing she needed to do to achieve her goal, she must be ready to do whatever it takes. The man screams in despair, begging to be spared. Now that he knows he won't get out of this alive, He begins to try to talk to get free. Bandits are all the same. Urian says they will regret killing him while the Mac asks if he knows anything. He doesn't even have the right to negotiate anything trying to win with words. The man says that if they kill him there, they will never find out which box hired him in the first place, and the Ryam said it was from Impum of the Pentagram Division. Celestial Body Inc. Hearing that name destroys the hope of a desperate Ryam. Man asks how he knew, and the protagonist then asks if he really thought he didn't know about the secret agreement between them, turning his back to the scene, and the Ryam said he would leave the rest to Riram, and she ends up covered in ketchup again. He screams even more in despair, begging her not to come closer, and also cries out for help. The Rio screams for Yongan in despair, begging for help. But the boy was also shaken by what he was witnessing, unwavering. Riram stood before the wretch who tried to harm her and her future. Beloved, yes, I'm already rooting for them to be together. Tears begin to fall from Ariam's face. He already knew there was no turning back. His last glimpse was of the presenter's back, and when he looked at him, his face had a grotesque and psychopathic smile. Then finally, with just a single blow of the sword, his head is separated from his body, and the Rio was satisfied, watching the fall of those who thought they knew everything and looked down on others. It was deeply satisfying. He knew this could be a distorted form of justice, but it was an inevitable aspect of his human nature, an indelible mark left after enduring that terrible first world. It may seem a bit strange, but he couldn't help it. It was who he was, and he was happy and enjoying. Looking up, the Master of Ceremonies simply says he hopes that from Impung of the Pentagram Division entertains as much as the three just did excited. The divine spirits say the story was spectacular, even if some still wanted more. And someone observes the scene, stunned, falling backward. He couldn't process what he had just experienced. The head of a Rio was beside him, and it left him so horrified that he ended up vomiting out of disgust and despair. The two look at him as he questions what he had done. When he thought he could help someone for the first time in his life, this happened. And to think that his supposed courage meant nothing, as he had been deceived by both since the beginning. Then he wonders why. Screaming at the two, he asks why they killed his companions. But the Mac said that if they hadn't done that, they would have died. Yongan screams that if they had just run away, no one would have needed to die. But to him, everything seemed like a joke. The narrators don't care about humans. He screams that the MC knows nothing. He has never had to suffer in life and has nothing to fight for. That's why he doesn't care. And the River said that everyone has a unique role in life. They simply refused theirs because they wanted more, so they risked their lives pursuing it. To Yongan, it may seem like they were chosen, but in reality, they were just like the boy there. Trembling and crying, the boy asks why he was the way he was. And the River replies that he accepted his reality while they are pursuing the reality they want to create. In the end, furious, the boy screams, asking what he can do if all his efforts end in failure, no matter how hard he tries. And the River observes the boy's despair, but simply says that the human world is small. He gets confused, believing that everything he sees and feels is all that exists, and when someone calls him a failure, he believes that is the truth of the world, and he only thinks this is the whole truth of the world because his focus is entirely on himself. The boy still seems confused by these words. The Master of Ceremonies explains that the real world doesn't care about him. It doesn't occupy itself with anything, nor knows that he exists, nor tries. If he wants to change things, he needs to start by changing his view of the world around him, and show others who he really is. This may be difficult, but it's a better path than simply giving up what he wants without even trying. After this speech, he decides to leave. Riram asks if it's okay to leave him like this, but the MC says it's fine, the boy will be okay, back to cleaning the dungeon. The girl continues to destroy everything in her path with ease until they reach the final boss, called Leprosy. With a massive leap, Jerem puts himself out of the monster plant's reach, and with a swing of her sword, she defeats him. That was really easy. They gain several different rewards for clearing this dungeon, and the story of the herb puller. Along with the boss's resin, the dungeon begins to disappear, and something catches the girl's attention. She comments that clearing one of these dungeons makes the dirt you gained in it disappear, too, except for the wounds and rewards. She finds it interesting that all the dirt from the dungeon disappeared after defeating the boss, and he explains that everything disappears except the wounds and rewards. After the MC's explanation, she wants to talk about another subject, saying that he is lost in thought. Since earlier, the MC continues thinking that he used to believe that people couldn't change. But seeing that boy's book change, color changed his perspective, maybe really. If there were some people who could change their own destiny, he tells her that it's nothing and says it's time to go. Returning to reality, they are greeted by several collectors crying because they couldn't enter the domain before them. The divine spirits found amusement in the collectors' despair as they cried, wanting compensation for their loss, unconcerned with them. The MC says he has already gotten everything he wanted from there and calls Yerim to go back to the company. Smiling, Yerim begins to relax, saying she is tired, while the other girl asks how work was today. Yerim says there was nothing special, but they received several rewards for completely clearing the area. Curious, the MC asks the girl to show him her status window, and she immediately agrees. Analyzing the data, he seems a bit frustrated, and upon noticing her expression, she asks if something is wrong, and he said everything there was very vague. It was as if all her abilities were excessively simplified. Even though she was growing rapidly, the girl agrees that it's strange, but he says it's very problematic, because it leaves them in the dark about her true potential in the MC's past life. The status metrics for all collectors were much more detailed. Unlike now, he asked the girl if she worked hard to grow and upon checking her status saw how she would feel. She answers desperately. That was the problem. It was as if this was intentional, to demotivate collectors using unclear metrics. There was someone behind this. Until then, the MC thought the apocalypse was caused by lazy collectors. But the real cause could be deeper. It was too early to suspect anything. But if his theory that someone might be behind this proved true, things would get interesting and the MC starts to chuckle softly. But if he hears and gets worried, the Master of Ceremonies reassures her, saying it's nothing but his thinking that those in the shadows trying to control everything might come after him. This way, he can truly enjoy taking them down, smiled. One had stepped out for a moment, but was already returning to the company. Aaron asks where she had gone, and she replies that she went to a meeting with the magazines and says she will soon do an interview. The girl panics, and Sorium explains that it was time to start exposing herself to the world. Collectors are like celebrities, explains the MC, and these things are part of life for her to be known. An interview is a great idea, but Riorino is annoying and doesn't want to participate in interviews. But the host says that money will flow like water falling from a waterfall if she does this. She immediately changes her attitude and asks how much she would receive, and Ryam said that a few 100,000 would be a little, and she agrees with everything. Changing the subject a bit, Sorium asks what the boy was doing, and he said he was working on a weapon, and he finds that strange since it was just an old, cheap sword from the system shop, and the MC agrees with that. He asks her to open her system window and check the sword's information, and she said it was an ancient sword from Sansario that was supposed to be good. The MC explains that this name is relatively famous in the world, mixed, an empire known for its magical engineering that made history. That sword was an ancient relic of the Salio Empire. The protagonist knew this, but the current world he was in didn't have that knowledge yet. This was a hidden item that couldn't even be found in the mind's domains, and Riram tells her that she needs to start training her main attack skill, which leaves the girl confused. Pointing at her, the MC explains that she will soon become a mid-tier collector and needs a skill that matches her physique. It turns out she skipped the process that most collectors take years suffering to develop, doing it at an impressive speed, which is why she needed to develop a technique worthy of a mid or high-level story, and he asks me if those stories aren't too expensive, and the boy replies that there's a way to get them almost for free. He asks her to open her shop and look for a low-level story called Thundersteps. She finds it, and we see that it costs 100 points. Next was the internal skill, Thunder Berserker in the mid-level stories, and finally, Fury of the Storm in the low-level stories. Riordan was supposed to buy these 3 stories, but Suri asks if they weren't known for being bad. No one could handle the speed provided by the Thundersteps skill. The Thunder Berserker skill was so strong that it made the user's body twist all the time, and finally, in the case of Fury of the Storm, it was an extremely useless sword skill. These 3 skills together were known as the 3 useless brothers, which leaves Riordan shocked. Was it really safe to learn them? And Rior asks the girl if she doesn't trust him, and she instantly decides to buy them, because she is in love with him and obeys him unconditionally. After acquiring the skills, she asks if she should learn them all at once, and then insert them into her body. Lightning starts to surge from the girl's body, startling Surium, while the protagonist immediately positions himself in front of her. He places the sword between the lightning that emanated from Riorum's body, and the sword starts to change its blade. Surium is scared of this transformation, and we see it has become a completely different sword, even impressing the protagonist, surprising the girl. He asks if this was the original form of the sword, and the river delivers it to her, telling her to be careful with the lightning. Looking at the blade, he thinks he knew it was a beautiful sword when he heard about it, but in person it was even better, and he now had a serious posture. It seems she had finally absorbed the stories she bought. He asks if she is feeling any discomfort, but she says she isn't feeling anything special. Now, it was time for her to open her status window and analyze the abilities she gained by combining those 3 stories. The 3 lightning abilities had disappeared from her talent tree and were replaced by something called Celestial Lightning Sword. This hidden piece was capable of allowing her to control the lightning that falls from the sky. It was a skill superior to any other high tier. Kiran was even more in love with the Mekana, and she jumps to hug him, but the boy notices the movement and quickly dodges. He tells her that she can't touch him until she learns to control the lightning, otherwise he will get shocked, and the girl cries. Getting up, she asks how he knew about that hidden piece. If he had shown it to the spirits, they would have loved it. The best option was to do this without them seeing. Otherwise, it would suggest many questions and that would be problematic. He explains that he didn't want any trouble from that, but tells her to forget it and throws the sword into her hands to absorb the lightning without her needing to do anything. The sword begins to dim the brightness of her body, which catches Suryum's attention. Grabbing the Mac by the arm, she asks to talk to him privately this time. He doesn't try to escape that scoundrel. Annoyed, she asks if he used Yerim as a battery to create the sword, and he said in the end it worked and it was all to help her. He is curious since she seems so worried about Yerim, and she, trembling, said she is worried that something might go wrong. If something happens to her, her office could be reduced to ashes. In reality, she is just worried about the money. Still annoyed, she asks the Master of Ceremonies to notify her in advance if he plans to do something like that again. And this makes the River remember that this girl also wasn't normal. A message arrives in his system and surprises the Mac. The sender was the old man from the association, saying he had found Yoon. The Mac quickly said he needed to leave, and tells Harem not to stray from the sword because he had something to resolve at that moment, running to the association. And the River begins to wonder why he is going there. In the first place, he had no reason to get involved with that guy. But why was he so focused on him? He would be angry when he saw. It's possible he wouldn't feel anything in the end. Anyway, he wanted to try to meet with him at least once, and upon arriving at the location, he said he wants to talk to Young. Before the receptionist could call the old man, he was already there, asking the boy to go with him. Surprising both alone in the meeting room, Young Mo asks what the relationship was between the Mac and that Choi Hyun, and Hyun replies that he doesn't know him. He only heard about him in rumors, and that seems to satisfy the old man, putting his hands on his robes. He said that thanks to the information the Mac provided, he was able to investigate the boy, and it wasn't even that difficult. Taking a photo and handing it to the Mac, he asks if that was the Choy Doyun he was looking for. Impressed, the Mac shouts that he is indeed the one he was looking for, and asks where he is now. The old man then explains that 10 years ago, when the Earth was added to the mixed world, something happened on the day of unification. No one had any information about where that boy was. He simply disappeared. This leaves the Mac shaken. The Mac, still reeling from the information that Choy Doyun had disappeared. Yang Yimu explains that he was one of those who disappeared during the 99 days of revolution. When the Earth joined the mixed world, there was a massive collision. All the barriers of reality collapsed, and stories became real. That day became known as the Day of Unification. That means that the Earth was forcibly added to a syndicate. Many people disappeared from the face of the Earth that day, and to this day, no one knows what caused these disappearances. Everything was a mystery. It was known that they had gone to another dimension, especially since some managed to return. But only as corpses. Those who returned alive from that other dimension came back as monsters. In the future, some of the missing would return whole and be known as returnees from another world, but that was not yet the case. Looking at the photo, the Mac thinks that the disappearance of Choy Doyun was really a surprise. Perhaps this happened in his previous life. The power and judgment he showed during the end of the world were shaped by his adherence to the rules of the other world. Interrupting his thoughts, the old man tells the MC that Doyun has a mother, which confuses the boy. He explains that she has been searching for him since the day of his disappearance, and now she wants to meet the Maked. And the River is even more surprised, and the old man asks if the boy is interested in meeting the woman. It was understandable that she would want to meet the Mac, considering that he might be the only clue about her son after years of searching on his feet. He said he would find her later, and asked the old man for help again if necessary, and the man replies that it would be him at any time. Holding the photo tighter, he wonders if his own parents were still alive in that reality, but was afraid to know if he existed in this world what would have happened to his past self. Could there be another King Rio in this world? If that were the case, could he still call his parents parents? How would they feel to see a box in human form? And what would happen if they thought that Mac was an imposter? Someone shouts his name. Bringing reality back, Rierum was in front of him holding the sword. He asks what she was doing there, and she replies, half blushing, that she followed him because he looked worried. When he left, she was worried about him. He apologizes for leaving like that, but says he is fine. It was nothing serious as she had thought. She comments that he really looks fine now. The girl invites him to return to the office, and he has a confused, curious expression. She asks if he still had something to do, but the protagonist does not respond immediately. He decided to become the main character. His story in this life and the biggest influence on this decision came from his parents. Therefore, even if they did not accept him as family, there was no reason for the protagonist to be afraid or run away from his goal, and Ryan says yes and asks if she would like to go with him. The girl becomes extremely excited and asks where they are going, smiling. Max says they are going to meet his saviors because regardless of everything, they were still his parents. On the bus, Rieren says the presenter is really interesting, a storyteller who does not mix with the others, and has a mysterious past, and Rio says she is wrong, but she does not believe him, and says that one day he will tell his story. The girl asks who these amazing people are that he calls his saviors, and the presenter agrees, they really are amazing. This answer makes Rieren wonder, what kind of people would make him speak with such respect? She really wanted to learn more about AI's past, since she knew nothing about it looking at the girl. Mac wonders if Rierum has a family. He could find this information in her book, but decides to do something better. The boy asks Rierum if she has an animated family. She asks if he wants to know. because he is interested in her, but the protagonist says no and that it's okay if she doesn't want to answer. She says she only asked that because she was happy. He asked her something, then says she has no family, which surprises the protagonist. Smiling, she said she had one in the past, but she can't remember her father who ran away right after her mother gave birth to her. Maybe that's why her mother abused her so much as a child and said she was not her daughter until one day a tragedy happened. He abused her so much as a child and said she was not his daughter until one day a tragedy happened. She was coming home, and when she opened the door, she came across an unforgettable scene. Her mother was hanging, lifeless, after taking her own life. After that, not much happened. Eventually, she ended up in an orphanage, where she was further bullied by the other kids because she was shy. The protagonist was shocked. She was about to say that it was all okay now since her life was different because of him. But he suddenly shouts her name. Smiling, she asks what it is. But he ends up saying it's nothing and comments that her life has also been very hard. The girl said she doesn't care about that. Thanks to him, she found what she wants to do with her life and no longer lives as a failure. Looking closely, she seemed about to break inside. The Sword Empress he knew was not like this. But the truth is, he never had the chance to know the Sword Empress. From the past, he didn't need to compare the two even if his mind was about to break. Depending on her actions, the girl had the potential to completely change her life. He tells her it's okay because he will never abandon or leave her. Blushing, she smiles and says she will never do that either. These two are so cute, I admit. Finally, they both arrive at the bus stop where they were supposed to get off. The protagonist's face was pale from being there. He starts to recognize all the places he used to hang out when he was a kid. Everything looked exactly like before. The only thing that was different was him. There was a playground where he used to skip school, and his mom always found him there when he did that. Someone yells to another person named Kang Yuhun, saying that she's skipping school again, and the girl shouts back that she will do it tomorrow. She passes by him, and when the MC sees her, he is surprised. Here we see proof that the multiverse really exists. Because it was the female version of the MC, it leaves him stunned and confused. The girl and Yuri looking at each other a bit shocked. Once again, someone yells Yuri's name. The person shouts that they already told her that those who run away from responsibilities, they can never succeed. Yura complains, telling her to stop being a pain while the MC stares at her speechless. That person in front of him was his mother. The woman notices the presence of the MC, and he approaches her. She apologizes for speaking so loudly in that place, but he wants to call her mom and whispers that as he gets closer, reality finally hits him, and the boy wonders what the hell he expected to happen. Kang Ryo doesn't exist in this reality. Someone is already in the place where he should be, interrupting his thoughts. The woman asks the MC to forgive her. Looking at him, she asks if the two know each other. Because he reminds her of someone, Yura points at him, asking if she is the only one who thought that, and if the MC knows her father. In the next moment, she notices Raren's presence. This makes her blush and get excited, shouting that this was the Sword Empress, the same one Yura had told her mother about in admiration. The girl approaches Raren and asks for an autograph, while her mother tells her not to scare the Empress. And Ryam says that maybe it was destiny for the four of them to meet like this, and invites the two to have a chat. Everyone goes to a cafe where they sit together. Yura's mother asks the MC what his name is, and he apologizes for not introducing himself earlier. He was Kang Yuri, an accountant from Celestial Body Inc. Yura is thrilled to meet an accountant for the first time, and her mother comments that he looks a lot like her husband and thought they might be related. And Ryam notices that his mother noticed something about his appearance, and he even wants to tell the truth, but unfortunately, he can't. Almost jumping out of his chair, the girl then confirms if the MC is really an accountant, and he says yes. She wants to know if he could turn her into a collector, and her mother scolds her, saying that it was very rude. The protagonist laughs and says there's no harm in asking, and the girl laughs, saying that he said it was okay, but her mother is still irritated, responding to her question. It is impossible to turn an ordinary person into a collector. They can only make contracts with those who already are one. The mother said that this is a relief. She thought Ryam might agree to make her a collector, which leaves the girl furious, irritated. The mother shouts that she needs to recognize her own limits and accept when something is beyond her control, biting her lip in frustration. The girl starts to cry. She runs away while her mother shouts her name, but decides to let her go wherever she wants. Trying to apologize again, the mother says she's sorry for her daughter showing her worst side there, but the MC recognizes this as part of her age. All young people must think being a collector is cool, but the mother says she only sees the glamorous side of it and is worried about her daughter. The worst part was knowing that the girl had no talent to become a collector. This statement catches the protagonist by surprise. He remembers going through the same thing when he was a child. His mother telling him that he had no talent for what he wanted to do. Calming down, he asks Yerim to go find Yura and give them some space to talk, and she agrees. When she leaves, Ryam says no one should give up on their path, just for lack of talent, and his mother agrees. Everyone should dream big, but there was more. She had learned in life that dreams are not achieved just by wishing, And Riem replies that even so, she was still his daughter. She agrees and wants the best for Yura, but the job of a collector is tough. She just doesn't want the girl to get hurt and wants her to grow up well. The boy said she wasn't wrong but shouldn't destroy her daughter's dream. No matter how difficult the path is, irritated, she asks if she should just let the girl go. But the MC suggests that she just show the girl the reality of how dangerous it really is. If she hasn't given up on this path yet, then there would be nothing more to be done. This leaves her mother confused. The MC explains that this means she would be walking this path, fully aware of the difficulties. She thought the girl's determination was weak. A simple phrase or act of encouragement can change a person's destiny, and the River believes that an honest conversation between the two could bring more clarity. He hopes she can believe in her daughter's dreams at least one more time, no matter how difficult it is. She needs to dream big. If Yura follows her dreams, she can become the protagonist of her life. The mother recognizes the words the protagonist used. No matter how dangerous the path may be, if someone's goal is at the end of it, they cannot be stopped. He asks once again for Yura's mother to believe in her daughter's dreams. The woman finally gives in and says that maybe she suffocated Yura's potential out of concern. Changing the subject, she finds it amazing how much he resembled her now adult son. Even though it was the first time they met, it was fascinating. The host gives an awkward laugh. When the coffee shop door opens, looking to see who entered, the two turn to look. Yura and Riorino were there, but the girl still seemed very upset, and the River asks her mother for permission and says he would like to talk to Yura privately. And she agrees. The boy then asks if she would like to talk with him for a moment, and still upset, she seems to agree. He asks why she wants to become a collector, and she asks if he will laugh at her answer. He said he won't. Yura said they always seem so cool and confident. With amazing lives, he probably thinks this is a silly answer, and the River said no, because he also had a similar dream. The girl is surprised. The master of ceremonies says anyone can dream. What matters is the determination. Then he asks if she is willing to risk her life for this dream. She seems confused, and the River explains that Riorino has been on the brink of death several times because of his dream. Yura was willing to do the same. Frustrated, she can't answer, but the MC says she doesn't need to answer now, just that one day she will need to have an answer for this. The girl then asks if the MC really thinks she has the potential to achieve her dream. If she really wanted to become a collector and had the determination for it, he thought she could succeed. Smiling confidently, the master of ceremonies says yes, she can make it. He thinks if someone had said the same to him, his life would have been different back then. He could have held her as a storyteller, that she could succeed, because he also wanted her to change. Above the happy and smiling face of the girl, her book shone with greater potential. That was enough. As they said goodbye, Yura thanks them for everything they did for her that day, and said she wished she could stay with them a little longer, but it was time to go. And Riem said he hopes that everything she wishes comes true, and that it was great to meet her. And Yura said she already knows everything will be fine. They finally say goodbye, but the MC's mother says nothing. The MC and Yuram are waiting at the bus stop for him to arrive, and the girl notices that he seems very happy. But he changes the subject the next moment. Someone calls out Yuri's name, and he turns to see who it was. Yuri's mother was approaching him, and the boy asks what happened. Getting up, the MC asks Yuram to wait a little, so that he can see what happened. When he approaches the woman, he asks what it is, and she says she had something to tell him before he leaves the next moment. She hugs the MC and says he has worked hard all this time. This catches Yuri by surprise. His face starts to blush and tears tremble in his eyes. He needs to tell her that he is not her son and set clear boundaries. She continues hugging him, but he can't stop this. And in the end, he returns her hug, saying yes, he worked hard upon releasing the boy. She says she will be rooting for him forever, and the protagonist thanks her as she walks out of his life forever. All he wishes for her is peace in the remaining days of her life, since his parents, in his past life, died at the beginning of the end. He won't let that happen in this life. He won't lose his parents, nor allow the apocalypse to begin. The scene shifts, and we see a jar of paint spilled. On a table, someone shouts in disbelief at something that happened unexpectedly. Watching through the system screen, those three useless idiots who were defeated by the MC and Yuram. We realize it's Jim Pung, furious at his plan having failed. He had only one last option to deal with him, but he didn't want to use that method, as even he might not be able to handle it, rejecting the idea. He shouts that he can't do it and then closes the system screen. Someone behind him asks what it is he said he can't do, and this scares the man. Looking back, he sees a small fairy whom he calls Argel and asks what she is doing in his library. She said she is there because she was wondering what her Jim Pung was doing and if he completed the task she assigned him. The narrator is horrified to hear the fairy complain that he did not complete the mission she gave him. She said she is very disappointed and that she believed in him, but he proved to be untrustworthy. Jim Pung tries to say that it wasn't like that dramatically. The fairy says she feels very sad about his actions, and for him trying to eliminate a colleague. Jim Pung protests, saying he could never do something like that. Gaia then makes a psychopathic expression and asks if he is saying that she is lying. The next moment, Jim Pung is thrown to the ground by an impressive gravitational force that brings him to his knees. He collapses to the ground with such impact that he cracks, and he asks how she is doing this to him within his own. In the library, the fairy explains that when he was hired by the department, he lost control over the library and could only regain it when he became a lord until that day arrives. He has no control over his workplace, which means he could die right there in the supposedly safest place possible. Releasing Gale, she says that she is a very generous senior and will give him one more chance to deal with Kang Yuhun. This time, indeed, he will even receive special service and support with points. Stammering, Jinpyum asks if she really wants him to do that. Gaia nods her head and says she wants him to host a storytelling battle. A bet among storytellers using their libraries as stakes. Nervously, Jinpyum said that a battle against the Sword Empress would be impossible, but the fairy said he would receive a collector worthy of the challenge. There was a collector in the department who was being secretly strengthened and was still unknown to the public. The divine spirits would be excited to see a collector capable of defeating the Sword Empress, and this gives Jinpyum hope. Back at Suri's company, we see a table full of cotton swabs and other materials. Mac was making modifications to the sword that had been charged thanks to Iran, as that sword had not yet revealed all its potential. He starts to engrave some mana circuits into the blade. The sword begins to shine and emit a large amount of energy, transforming it from an ancient relic into a powerful piece of magical engineering. Besides gaining 100,000 points for doing this, he also received the story of the engraver. This was the true form of the ancient relic, showcasing various, extremely powerful statistics on the sword, so many that I won't even mention them here. Still, the sword had other abilities that were locked, and the protagonist still couldn't see them. Something in the description catches his attention. The sword had a huge ego, which confuses him a lot. The weapon starts to tremble in his hand, and the sword screams that it was finally free, scaring the protagonist and his pet. Looking down, we see a small head with a book on top, and the protagonist is as shocked as I am to see this thing. That sword was not just talking, it had its own personality. It reminded me of the manhwa about the boy who hears the voices of swords. She asks who her master is, and Mac introduces himself as Yuri. The girl is surprised to see that he is a storyteller and asks if he is going to sell her. The boy explains that he intends to use the sword instead of selling her, which makes the girl very curious. Mac changes the subject and asks her name. With a very cute face, she says she has slept so long that she ended up forgetting her name and asks Yuri to give her one. He doesn't understand, and she explains that since he was able to wake her up, he must be talented as a recorder, so he might have talent for naming as well. Looking at the weapon, he remembers his little owl. Since both were very white, the protagonist then decides to name the girl Byakryon, which means White Lotus. She likes the name and accepts. Emitting energy once again, she says that he is now her master. And then she transfers some abilities to him, and Ryam acquires the story of the one who inherited what was forgotten, and gains the title of Registrar while her story is also transferred to the sword. The girl lets out a scream that startles the MC. He asks what's wrong, and she then asks what it's about. Him being someone reincarnated, this question catches the protagonist by surprise, shocked. He realizes that she read his past because of the contract they made, and the protagonist starts to stutter. Trying to explain who he is, she watches him closely as he decides to tell the truth. Since there was no reason to hide anything from her at that moment, after explaining everything, she asks if he found her because he knew of her existence in the future, and he says yes. But no one knew she had an ego. The girl then explains that because of his recorder ability, he was able to wake her up completely, while the other owner couldn't at all. She was excited to know that her master was a storyteller because she was curious about the stories they tell. Smiling, the MC said that from now on, she will see many of these stories, and he extends his finger to greet her and seal their friendship. The scene changes and we are in a wide green field. Only the MC and Raram are there, and the boy asks if she is ready. She confirms. He opens his library and several people immediately enter, reaching a total of 2,163 spectators, and the river greets the divine spirits and says that after a few days of rest, they will be able to return with a new routine of live broadcasts. This leaves the spirits very curious, but the MC says he will show little by little and asks for patience. First of all, he was going to explain what kind of story they were going to tell that day before he could continue his explanation. Someone says his name, calling his attention. Turning around, he wants to know who called him. Interrupting his broadcast, Jinpyum was there, saying he had a request to make. He wanted a storytelling battle against the MC. This challenge summons the divine spirits, who go into a frenzy, intrigued by the completely unexpected event. The White Lotus appears and asks what that was, and he explains that it's a battle between the stories of the celestial body storytellers. Noticing her presence, he asks if it's okay for her to appear in front of everyone, but she said that only the MC can see and hear her. Anyway, he explains that these battles, they focus on the collector's abilities, and the winner gains the loser's library rights. This second part makes the sword nervous. It was very dangerous. And Pingum asks why the MC doesn't accept the challenge. He was scared. The MC suggests he could accept, but in the end says he won't and laughs in the other storyteller's face. The divine spirits are disappointed, and Pingam gets furious with the refusal. But the MC stands firm in his decision. He had the right to refuse. The sword asks if it was okay to refuse, but the MC simply doesn't care. Others accept it out of pride, but not him. Jim Pung scolds the MC for not accepting the challenge and asks if he has no honor. But Hyun said he is not the one to talk. It was obvious to the boy that he had planned to throw the challenge. As soon as he opened his library, it was just a tactic of intimidation. He thought Hyun would be too embarrassed to refuse in front of his spectators, which irritates the spirits. Due to the arrogance of the storyteller, even Jim Pung's own subscribers were unhappy with his behavior. They even wanted to file a complaint about him in his department, trying to calm things down. And Riem said there was no need for a scandal and pretends to care about him as if he were a rookie. The boy knows he can't treat him too coldly, as that could harm his library. Meanwhile, the spirits say they want the battle. Several donations start coming in for both, while everyone gets excited to see this duel, a storytelling duel. And the MC notices this behavior. Approaching the counter, he says he has a condition, to which Jim Pung asks what it is, and Riem says the winner will take everything the loser has, including the right over his life. Jim Pung is surprised by this, but soon after believes the MC willingly walked into his trap. The boy said it was a great offer for both, and laughing. The other narrator accepts the proposal confidently. He said it was the MC who suggested it, so he couldn't backtrack on his words in the end, and thus the deadly battle was set. All of this left the little fairy very intrigued and excited. She was already curious about the Master of Ceremonies for becoming famous so quickly, but he was proving to be much better than she expected. Seeing him refuse to conform to the environment and openly ignore it, letting it go, would be terrible for her department. Anyway, it was all right. Now that he has become such a coveted prey, the fairy could simply devour him. The scene changes and we see Riram looking worried, asking if the MC will be okay. He replies that he is doing this just because he knows everything will be fine, and it's also a chance to show the power of his sword. And the Rio asks if she is worried about him. She hesitates a little and the boy reassures her. Some divine spirits were also questioning his actions, especially for making such a risky bet. The White Lotus complains that they don't even know what they will do on the other side. He is simply crazy for going against an entire department alone. The Master of Ceremonies explains that, as he said before, the easiest people to deceive are those who think they understand all of reality. She asks what that has to do with anything, and he says it's the same case. Everyone in that department behaves arrogantly. Riley asks if he made that bet on purpose, and the Master of Ceremonies says yes, he had a method to defeat everyone at once. The sword calls him a psychopath, and he thanks her for the compliment, but she calls him crazy for thinking that was a compliment, surprising the protagonist. The system appears, announcing that there are only 5 minutes left until the storytelling battle begins. The protagonist then takes his little owl and thanks it for its services. Throwing it out the window, the little creature flies out determined. Riram asks if they can go now because she wants to see the stadium before fighting, but the MC has something to discuss with her first. He wants to ask her something and she looks at him curious about what it could be. Jim Pung was confident in his victory, even knowing that the opponent was an Empress of the Sword. They were too arrogant. Not even she would be able to defeat the collector he had received for that special occasion, and to think that the department would designate someone so powerful for him that left him excited for him. It was obvious that the department recognized his skills. Otherwise, they would never have given him someone so strong. With only 1 minute left until the battle begins, the announcer calls the collector to go. He looks a little lazy, but obeys Jim Pung. It's time. Both teams enter the arena. When applause erupts throughout the stadium, the audience was excited. If you look closely, everyone looks like test dummies. The author must have been very lazy to finish his designs. Pung orders him to go to battle, but the boy says not to boss him around. He was going to do that anyway. And that was annoying. This irritates the narrator, but he tries to stay calm. Because it was necessary to win the battle against the Master of Ceremonies, the collector begins to talk about how his opponent is the Empress of the Sword and how excited he is. He wonders how it will be to cut her while shouting. Jim Pung warns that she is approaching and we see a silhouette appear in front of his collector. The narrator's expression is far from satisfied. He seems shocked, and just that look tells us what happened. This also seems to catch the fairy by surprise. While she looks at the system screen and lets out a sigh, the collector looks at his opponent and asks what happened. In front of them was the Master of Ceremonies with his sword sheathed, and he gives a confident smile. The two were in a battle arena style like Dragon Ball Z with the Jim Pung outside. Like a boxing trainer, they were facing each other without making abrupt movements. Before the fight began, the test dummies were watching. Some looked frustrated with what they were seeing. They could be divine spirits. The next image answers that question. They are avatars of divine spirits, and the one speaking is none other than Satan himself. Impressed, the Jim Pung collector asks if a box is allowed to do this fight in place of the collector, and he replies that there are no rules against it. In the end, it didn't matter to him, even if the Max surprised him. This was a great opportunity to get rid of the kid. He then orders his collector to eliminate him, but the collector said he was already going to do that. There is no need to keep repeating the same thing. White Lotus asks if it is really okay to do this, but the Mac doesn't seem too concerned, emitting a frightening red aura. The sword then tells him that this guy is not ordinary. Picking up his book to read, the protagonist says there is nothing to worry about. We see that the book is silver, so it must be common upon opening to read. And the river receives a very unpleasant surprise. Those powers were really not normal. That guy was none other than Jack the Ripper, a serial killer who will appear in a year, eliminating collectors in the real world, unfortunately. In his reality, no one discovered Jack's identity until the end of time. When he himself revealed it in the end, he was eliminated by 2-1 after becoming the target of the assassin unsheathing his sword. The Mac sees that this threat needs to be eliminated as quickly as possible, or many innocents will be harmed. The Pentagram was involved in this. Just like in his past life, they definitely have some connection to the apocalypse. Karen was in a room watching the battle. She was very nervous, thinking that it should have been her fighting there. If something happens to Yuri, she will never forgive herself. We return to the scene where he tells her that she cannot go, and she explodes at him, saying that there was no reason for him to go in her place. The Mac explains that this fight is his. She doesn't need to get involved, but she protests that she is his collector, so she should fight. And the river said that if he were a regular box, then yes, it would be her who should fight. This doesn't satisfy the girl. The protagonist notices this and says he understands her concern, but she doesn't believe in his potential. Even though he is grateful for her concern, she is only worried because she thinks he will lose. Nervously, she admits to herself that it's true, and the river believes her, but she can't. She can't believe in him. Suddenly, the boy places his hand on her head, catching her by surprise as he tells her not to worry. He says he isn't as weak as she thinks, but she is blushing too much to think clearly. Feeling confident, he says he will prove to her that she is anxious for nothing and prove that those who laughed at him were wrong. Back to the present, she admits she is still nervous, but that she will believe in her storyteller. The battle is finally about to begin. The landscape changes completely. Several old buildings appear around the Mac, and we see that they copied the Chumatsu in Valkyrie. He was in an area similar to the Whitechapel district in London. White Lotus catches the Mac's attention, asking him to look ahead. Jack disappeared the moment after. He was right in front of them, but now he's gone. He was probably using camouflage. Observing from above, we see Jack already on top of one of the buildings, wondering how he should eliminate the protagonist. He was planning his attack when the Mac turns and looks directly at him, catching him completely by surprise. Entering his disguise again, he wonders if he was seen, but assumes it was just coincidence. Trying a new approach, he starts to plan his attack again. When the Mac once again turns to face him, this really shakes the boy's confidence, making him question if the Rhyme is really seeing. Through his disguise, the little fairy who is watching the collector asks if he shouldn't be confident in his prototype camouflage. This question makes Jack nervous, and he tells her to shut up, that he will handle it his way. Even if the Mac can figure out his location, he won't be able to do anything. If attacked from a blind spot, he thinks the Mac won't be able to block an attack from behind. But the Mac once again turns to face him. With a simple move, he dodges Jack's strike, which further shakes his confidence. How did he do that again? He hides in the shadows, and the Mac just watches him retreat. We have a view from the Mac's perspective, and we understand why he can see Jack. His book was glowing above his head. White Lotus asks how he can see the boy, and Hyun simply says he has his ways. Realizing that the boy knows the McCoy can see through his camouflage, she asks what he will do now. He replies that he will act. With a leap, he charges towards the assassin, who now has a terrified expression. The boy blocks the protagonist's strike, but is not happy at all about being seen. This completely destroyed his expectations. Scared, Jack screams, asking how the MC found him. The MC mocks that all he can do is hide. This offends the collector, who screams that this is not his only skill. Disappearing from the protagonist's sight, he reappears right behind him, ready to deliver the final blow. Jerem screams in despair as the dagger approaches his back, and the collector screams for the MC to go to hell, but he easily dodges. They glance at each other for just a second. While the MC smiles, in the next moment, Jack had already moved away from him, and the river asks if he is done raising his sword and even more confident in his ability. The MC says it is now his turn in the stands. We see the MC's owl flying closer to the divine spirits. It lands on a wall and listens to the spectators' comments. Although impressed with the master of ceremonies, they still underestimate him. A magic circle appears beside the owl as it carefully observes the spirits. The master of ceremonies can hear their conversations through his pet and hears the spectators still belittling his abilities. He tests this ability of Batio and ends up being impressive, nothing less than expected from this gift. Anyway, it is clear that the divine spirits still believe he is weak compared to the other collector, and this excites him. This was his perfect opportunity to show them that things were completely different from what they thought, and he advances to attack, preparing. Jack tries to figure out from which side the sword will come, left or right, so he can parry it. Something suddenly catches his attention before he can even think. He dodges one of the protagonist's strikes, but it wasn't a sword in his hands a second ago. He had a sword, but now he was holding a spear. when he swapped weapons. Several strikes are delivered by the protagonist, but Jack manages to dodge all of them. He was scratched, but still had the ability to dominate the protagonist even with his change in posture. Not long after he is already able to analyze the attack pattern and the reach of the weapon, it was time to take that fight seriously, and the river jumps back, with the spear ready to attack Jack from above, but Jack realizes he won't reach him. Jack screams, calling the MC an idiot. He will be stabbed before his spear gets close. It's no surprise that the spear hits the boy's shoulder, catching him off guard and making him drop one of his blades. He looks at his wound shocked, and on the ground he asks how the MC did that. But the MC said he wasn't seeing the big picture, his failure. In predicting that last attack was obvious, the spear had become much longer and now it was too high for the MC. Shouting, the boy calls Yurim a cheater, but the narrator simply said he has a skill problem and that it was his fault. Losing all composure, he tells the MC to shut up and jumps into his attack. All he needed was to get close. It was enough to the MC and eliminate him in the most painful way possible. He was about to succeed. A blue light emanates from the protagonist and hits the other collector directly in the shocked face. He sees that the MC now has a shield in his hands. He finally realizes that the MC was not switching weapons. His weapon was transforming and once again becomes a sword, and the river attacks with a vertical cut, but the collector manages to block it with his daggers immediately. The MC prepares for a second vertical cut, and Jack prepares to stop him again. The weapon changes once more now to a spear that hits the ground, right between Jack's legs, which he barely dodges. The MC swings the weapon for a sideways strike, and by then it had already transformed into an axe while Jack ducks. Apparently the MC manages to land the hit as a small explosion is triggered by the impact. Jack is terrified. How could a weapon like that exist, and how could he wield it with such skill? He was truly a storyteller. The divine spirits wonder where he got that weapon. One of them theorizes that it was heaven or pandemonium that gave it to him. They were still just rumors, but one of them heard that both the deep darkness and Miguel appeared to him. Satan is listening to this and is impressed by the MC's ability to attract attention in any way. He is annoyed at being called Deep Darkness instead of his real name. Jack had truly been hit. He is lying on the ground, bleeding, with a considerable hole in the wall behind him, and the river does not give him time to think and already charges in for his final attack, which completely catches Jack off guard. He quickly reacts and manages to dodge to the side, avoiding being cut in half by the ping strike, and the little fairy asks what Jack is doing, which irritates him even more. He tells them to shut up, that he will deal with this. As he gets up, Jack says he will give credit for having cornered him so well, but he left his guard open. Strange letters begin to spread across his body. He was transforming into some kind of monster, his body growing and emitting electricity. The fairy gets excited about this, saying she didn't expect him to use that against a low-level counter like Urian. Installing Jack screams that things will no longer be so easy for him. With impressive speed, Jack leaps into the air. He moves throughout the area he created. With incredible agility, not even the protagonist seems able to follow his movements. The divine spirits are shocked that they can't even see them move. They didn't know anyone so strong and fast. Appearing beside the protagonist's face, Jack screams that it's too late to regret what he did. In the next moment, the river asks who he is talking about. Himself. He grabs the collector's arm and throws him against the wall with even more speed. Exploding on impact, Jack is stunned and seems to faint as well. And the fairy, watching everything from afar, can't believe it. And the river said he would have taken care of the collector much earlier if he knew the fight would be so boring on the ground. Unable to move, Jack is incredulous about his defeat. He screams, asking, "What the hell is the protagonist? This should be his story. He should be the main character of all this. But the protagonist shouldn't be anything more than a sacrifice to make him shine even more in the eyes of others. How can he lose with the blade at the boy's neck?" The protagonist says he was intoxicated by his own power and lost because of his pride, and the river tells him to take a good look at who defeated him. He was the winner. His words are, "I am the true protagonist of this stage." The boy whispers, "For mercy," but it's too late, raising his sword. The Mac says this was his power, the value that Jack underestimated all along. All we see is blood splattering as Urian claims his complete victory. Shocked by the whole fight, the divine spirits were also incredulous at the Mac's victory. He wipes his bloodied sword as the system announces his victory. The area will soon disappear. Someone starts clapping timidly, but is soon followed by others who are ecstatic about the battle. Smiling, the Mac begins to laugh, seeing that everyone is enjoying his show. Rihanna is emotional, having watched the whole fight. The boy really defeated a tremendously powerful collector. Even so, she is frustrated for not having been able to believe in him until the end. But she will change that attitude and says she believes in him now and will never replace him with anyone in this world. That was a declaration of love. I think so, because she calls him my light. Miguel is shocked and says the river is incorrigible after all this. More and more, divine spirits will want to sponsor him from now on. Smiling, he said he expects even greater feats from him and seems to have accepted that he will never be able to control someone like the Mac. We return to Jim Pung's library, where Gallo is yelling at him, furious about his defeat. She screams, demanding he say something, but at that moment, he is being choked by the power of his superior. Coughing for air, the collector she gave him was defeated by a rookie cashier as if it were nothing. Pum protests, saying someone must be behind him. Someone had to be helping him. Gaia interrupts him, saying there are no excuses. Nothing would change the current situation, and now there is no going back. She needed to find someone to take the blame. Because of this situation, the person who caused all this chaos within the pentagram, Jim Pung, screams in despair, begging her to have mercy on him, but his face was pale with rage. He had failed in his mission, and there was no forgiveness. Nothing he said could fix this. The losses he caused were so great that he could not repair them even if he worked for a lifetime. The narrator was in despair. This only made Argyle hate him even more. He had lost the rights to his library because of his defeat. Eliminating him was the best option. She was already being merciful by doing this because his life would be much worse if he remained alive. Jim Pung was in complete despair, not understanding how things had ended in that way. That bastard Kang Yuhun had known from the start that he would win. He knew everything, and Jim Pung was never the hunter in this story. Tears began to fall from his eyes as he was already seeing his inevitable end. The counter disappears into the shadows. After being eliminated by Argyle, a sound is heard, and the fairy looks back, still with a pure expression of disgust, and the river was opening the door. She quickly changes her expression and starts talking to him, cheerfully introducing herself. The MC also introduces himself to her. She said she loved watching his fight because it was amazing, and he pretends to be embarrassed, saying he doesn't know how to respond to such a compliment. The MC asks where Jim Pung is, but with a sad face. She replies that he no longer exists since he lost the storytelling battle, and his life was part of the deal. He was destined to be eliminated from the start. The MC thinks this is strange, even though they had bet their lives. He never ordered that Diping die, Gale said. She doesn't know that, because it was her first battle. Stopping the pretense, he seriously asks if she could stop talking nonsense. She turns to him, asking if she heard wrong what he said, and the river said she heard perfectly. He wants her to stop talking nonsense because she got rid of something that belonged to him, and that was wrong. Gale says that even if she was wrong, she is still superior to him and deserves respect. But the MC says that she abused her power in the end. Returning to her friendly behavior, she says she really made a mistake, but she will compensate him properly. The fairy transfers 800 points to the MC and asks if that is enough to settle things between them. The MC looks at her and says he already knows who she is. She was a psychopath who laughed at the deaths of people dying right in front of her. She had harassed them all the time. The image of her gathering people who refused to participate in a challenge just to cause a massacre was something the protagonist could not forget. The way she looked at all those corpses as if they were worse than insects was unforgettable. Confirming that he received the points, the protagonist said it seems enough to cover his jump loss, and praises her for how she handled him. Excitedly, she says he knows how to flatter her, and claims to be a benevolent person. Provocatively, the MC asks if she knew about something. There was a rumor circulating that a certain department was in contact with the Exodus. This catches Argyle's attention. The Exodus was one of the forces controlling Mickey's world, and they thrived in despair. And in the anguish of the smaller worlds, it was very likely that the Pentagram Department was in contact with them. Even in his past life, when several departments were shut down and everyone pretended nothing had happened, Gale asks why the MC is saying these things to her. Someone might hear and think that the Pentagram Department is on the side of the Exodus. Raising his hands, and the river said he's just warning her in case they get involved with them. But he apologizes for the misunderstanding. Anyway, he was about to leave now to claim the library he won from Jim Punk while the little fairy waves at God. When the MC finally leaves the room, we see Argyle's true face, and she was not happy with the situation at all, and the river notices this. He knows she is different from Jim Punk. Dealing with her won't be easy. She knows how to hide information about herself and her department. The simple fact that the Pentagon Department has connections with the X already says a lot. Creating someone like Jack in secret illustrates this very well. It definitely won't be simple or easy to deal with these people alone. However, he had an exit. Picking up a book, he tells himself that things will be different from how they were last time. Back at Sorium's company, she said she would like him to give her information in advance about what he plans to do. She reprimands him because they had gone out to make some money and suddenly ended up in a battle of stories. Both apologized to her, and Sorium said she would stop there since they were regretful, and they still came back with a victory from the battle. Riram says the MC was amazing, and Riam says that the capacity of his library has increased a lot, and the divine spirits were satisfied watching more closely. He notes that Riam seems a bit too happy and comments on it, which scares her. Excitedly, she said she didn't want to say anything, but since he was so curious, she would tell. The MC said he never asked, but it was already late. Smiled. One shouts that today is payday, and radiating enthusiasm. I feel that way too when my salary hits my account. Riam is curious, but it was pretty obvious what it was about, and Sorium told her to check her account. to see how much she received. The girl opens her phone and her face shows complete surprise and embarrassment. Overwhelmed, she shouts to the MC asking what she should do. She was completely rich. But Hyun said it wasn't that much yet. Hyun also explains that besides that, after Harem became famous, they secured many more commercial contracts totaling 200 million. Both were completely ecstatic about the money and already planning some simple renovations in the office. And Rio and her two little companions look at the scene with a look of disgust at the girl's simplicity. Lotus asks why they were acting that way, and Rio explains that they should leave them alone because both grew up poor. Anyway, Baeko's office was full of life now. Both were absurdly happy, and Rio asks if they couldn't just buy the side dishes at the store. But both think that's something only rich people do. The scene changes. But we're still in the office. Suryan seemed quite busy with her tasks. The MC notes to himself that she was like this because of all the interviews and offers Rihanna was receiving. He also had work to do, but the system notified him that Celestial Body had sent him a message. Although he hadn't seen it before, the system window informs him that he earned a promotion and is now a senior within the company. Receiving some rewards for it made him very happy. Finally, he was being recognized for his work. As he reads the rest of the notifications, he sees that he was still not officially a lord. He would need to go through a promotion ceremony, which he hates. Still, he thinks better since he would have to go there anyway soon, but now it would take longer because of the ceremony. Noticing the MC's distraction, Ririn asks what's wrong, and he said he was apparently promoted, and she congratulates him. Suru also congratulates him, and he thanks them but also asks how her work is going. She said she had already dealt with most of it, but there was still a lot to do, which overwhelmed him just by hearing it, and Rio said she must be overwhelmed, but she said she was fine, and he needs to be in touch with business people now, taking the opportunity. He asks if she has time to talk about it now. She said yes and asks what he wants. And Rio invites the girl on a date, which completely surprises her. She even drops the pen she was holding. Outside, Suru said he was being very clever. He was really good at saying something like that. In front of Ririn, he said she was too calm, so he wanted to tease her a bit. And the result was even better than he expected. Changing the subject, he asks if she is having trouble finding someone to handle negotiations with other companies, and she said yes. The protagonist was anxious to resolve this, and he knew it was difficult for an unknown company like hers to build trust and close partnerships. He invited her out because he wanted to help if an accountant showed up in person. Not even the big companies could underestimate her. She smiled and thanked, and said there was a company she was considering, but there was a problem. She asked him to listen carefully for a moment, and he turned to give her his full attention. They stopped at a cafe. And then the girl began to explain that her family was relatively well-off and peaceful, despite having grown up without a mother. Things were going well, and she had a brother who was a collector, and was becoming known in the field along with his team. But one day, her brother died in an accident, and all the problems started shortly after that. Several collectors, even some from important clans, were also injured or died in that incident and sued her brother. He was dead and could not respond to the lawsuit. So her family lost a lot. The MC began to reflect on this story and the injustice caused. He smiled. He believed in the goodness of her brother. He was a good person like no other and valued his family, but saw something wrong in society, and the MC asked if he thought that mental domains should not be preserved. And the girl confirmed this. This made the master of ceremonies realize it was the same situation he had experienced with the old man. From the association, that's why her family was sued. He even began to think that her brother's death might not have been a mere accident and decided he would investigate the situation soon. Someone called out Suryam's name, and she seemed to recognize the voice as she got startled upon hearing it. An old man recognized her and said it was nice to see a familiar face around. He greeted her, and she greeted him back. The old man then said he was sad about her leaving the clan, but heard that she opened her own agency. At least she was making some money. And the MC asked the girl who that man was, and she replied that he was a senior from her previous job. John Kwang-sek, he belittled the protagonist, saying he looked weak, and asked Suryam if he was a collector regarding the contract with her. Surprised, the old man praised her, saying that most personal agencies don't last long in the business, and asked how she managed to land a collector. Still teasing the girl, he asked if she was capable of dealing with a collector properly. But the MC interrupted him and called the old man's name. He approached the boy and introduced himself, asking if he was already familiar with her agency. The MC politely introduced himself. The old man said he hadn't heard of him before and asked his position, but the MC interrupted again and told him to get lost. This infuriated Kwang Seok, who demanded to know how he dared to speak to him that way. He looked so young, he had no manners. And Ryan responds that what he really wanted to do was to beat the old man, but he was holding back out of respect for Suryan, even though the old man had been rude. The girl stands up and asks the Mac to stop with the provocations, but Kwansok was already angry and starts insulting the boy. The master of ceremonies looks at Suryam and says that insulting her was the same as insulting him. She didn't want him to do anything. The old man then asks what their relationship was, suggesting that there was something between them. He said that if he knew about her talents, she could have come to him at work too. Laughing, he adds that this way he could have had fun too in the next moment. The old man's head spins back from the blow the protagonist dealt him. The old man is thrown back, and his companions panic when they see this. The two men ask if the protagonist has lost his mind. While the old man is still lying on the ground like a piece of trash, he gets up, screaming that the boy was a criminal for attacking a civilian being a collector. He would pay for this when Sok says to his men to call the special unit, but the Mac says it's pointless, even if they call them, and the river wasn't a collector to begin with, so he didn't break any law. The old man looks confused and asks in response. The Mac asks how he plans to punish an accountant using collector laws with a trembling voice. The old man is surprised to realize that the boy is an accountant, and the Mac tells him to keep going, keep saying what he was saying before. The men start to surround him, saying that even being an accountant, he crossed the line, and if he didn't stop, they wouldn't just stand by. Smiling, the Mac asks if that's really what they want to do. He said they can use their weapons, but the moment they do, they will be eliminated, and the river had a terrifying expression on his face while threatening the lives of those fools. He tells the three to get out of there before he wipes them off the face of the earth, and they are terrified by his words. The three flee like a bunch of clowns while the Mac just watches the pathetic scene. Surian is impressed, and the Mac asks what she thought he was quite reliable, right, sighing in relief. She said that she couldn't stop him. Going back to their conversation, she asks why he chose her. While we see the poor employee cleaning up the mess after the incident, she ended up being blacklisted by the clans and could never collaborate with other companies again, and the river asks if she held a grudge against her brother. The girl replies that at first, yes, but after thinking she knew he wasn't a bad person, he just got involved with the wrong people. The boy asks if she will accept this injustice without doing anything, and she asks what she could do against it. Those people. He agrees with her concern but says that is exactly why he wants to help her, which surprises the girl. Smiling and getting up, he says he wants to turn this world upside down and prove to all those idiots that they were wrong. It may seem absurd at this moment, but soon he would change the girl's opinion and invites her to start looking for partners right now. Extending his hand, he says he will help her, which leaves her completely speechless at first, but soon she becomes very happy. Holding his hand, she says he might end up regretting it, but he says he is the kind of person who acts first and thinks later. The scene shifts, and we see an old man thanking the deal. Leaving the place, Suriam finds it surprising that the deal worked and says it was thanks to the Mac, but he says he just did what he could. Frustrated, the girl asks why he would need her as a manager if he was solving everything on his own, but he said they need to help each other grow. Looking at her in the river, he said they were all in the same boat and that she could be weak in this area, but was extremely strong in others. Now it was time to laugh if they didn't come back soon. Riarim could start saying something and smiled, asking if they should buy something for her back at the office. The Mac was waiting outside for something. He heard the screams coming from inside the room. One of the girls was saying to the other to keep her head up so she wouldn't mess up her makeup. The two girls leave the room and we see that Riarim looks stunning in her dress. She asks the Mac what he thinks of her. Look, the master of ceremonies responds that he knew she was beautiful, but today she looked even more gorgeous, which makes her super happy. It was time to go. As they enter the building, Riarim comments that the place is huge, and the Ryam says it's one of the largest magazines in the country. Upon arriving at the reception, he says they are there for an interview, and the receptionist directs them to the 7th floor, and the Ryam thanks while we have a beautiful view of Riarim in serious mode. Trying not to show off too much, this leaves the receptionist totally perplexed while Suriam and the other two decide to go their separate ways since she had something else to do. The two leave while the receptionist is still blushing. I get it, I'm also afraid of beautiful women. Upon arriving in the room, they are welcomed by a woman who says she was waiting for them. She asks who Yuri is, and he introduces himself as Harem's manager who was there to support her. Happy to see that Harem had another manager besides Suri, she introduces herself as Shingaryong, a friend of Suri. Starting the interview, she said they were doing something no one had done in years, and asks what the goal was in clearing mental domains. Ririn calmly responds that she doesn't need a reason to do it as a collector, she is simply doing it, that the interviewer should ask about her future plans, and what she thinks about being called the Empress of the Sword by others. The girl gives her answer. We don't hear it, but it seems to have excited the interviewer, who says there's nothing to worry about. Changing the subject, she looks at the host and says she heard something recently. She wanted to ask about the accountant who was with the humans, something very uncommon for them. Finding this interesting, she mentions the story of someone who gave up their protective blessing to become a collector, and the host realizes she knows it's him, admitting. He says he is the cashier the rumors talk about. Even more excited, she admits she had a feeling he was the famous seer. The girl apologizes if that sounds rude, but she wanted to ask something purely out of curiosity, not just for journalism, and the host asks what it is. He can answer, as long as it's not something problematic, and she wants to know why they clean mental domains. He said it was just to gain popularity faster, but she questions if that's really the only reason. Understanding the situation, the boy said it doesn't matter. But yes, he had a bigger goal in mind, because he saw something others didn't. Getting up, he said the interview would end there after all. The real star was the Empress of the Sword. No, she. The interviewer seems to catch the hint and agrees to wrap up the interview at that point. Joking with Rerum, she said she would also like to have the kind of relationship where she could hire Urian personally, which makes Rerum jealous. Back to the building Sagan. They meet Surim, who greets them. She asks how the interview went and says the interviewer is very playful. The MC says it ended well, although Rerum's face says otherwise, looking around carefully. He notices the place was crowded and very noisy. A famous person must have been there. A famous collector. He was there with 2 women serving as his security, and many people were excited about his presence. White Lotus asks what the problem is with this guy, but the MC wasn't interested in him at all, and Hyan tries to convince her to go out with him, but she seemed so excited about the collector's presence that she didn't hear him. Once again, the protagonist tries to catch her attention, which surprises the girl and leaves her confused about what he had done. Curious about the situation, he picks up the collector's book to see what he was doing to attract so much attention from the women. One of its features was called New Home, and he wonders what the hell that meant. The guy only had some kind of sexual appeal. The collector starts walking towards the MC and smiles. He warns. While he is still distracted with the book, he approaches Ryerim and says it's a pleasure to meet her, introducing himself as Ju Kyun, but she seems to not care at all. Kyun says he has heard a lot about her, and came in hopes of getting to know her better. Then he starts flirting. Ryerim's expression is one of pure disgust. This makes the Master of Ceremonies realize that not even the guy's skill could break her mental fortress. Annoyed, Lotus said he was only there because of Ryerim, which makes the MC want to act. Before he gets any closer to the girl, he places himself between them and says Ryerim is uncomfortable with his presence. Introducing himself as her convinced manager, the collector says it's absurd that a mere manager like him is in his way and claims he is famous and known by all. And Ryerim says that is irrelevant. He doesn't want that guy near his collector because she doesn't like it, which makes the girl blush a little. The man laughs and says there is no woman who doesn't like him or hasn't heard of him. This attitude leaves both the MC and White Lotus even more irritated and eager to teach him a lesson before they can do anything. Ryerim asks him to stop because he is being a nuisance. He agrees, but still. He invites her out. She apologizes but says she needs to decline. She doesn't have time for this kind of thing, even though he keeps insisting. Ryerim pushes his hand away from her chin and asks him to step back immediately, and this seems to make him more serious. Smiling again, he said he tried to talk to her gently, but apparently that won't work. As he takes off his gloves, he throws them at her, leaving the girl completely confused. He then said he wants to challenge the Empress of the Sword to a duel. The NPCs behind the collector start getting excited about the idea of seeing their idol duel and hope he wins. Lotus asks if it's okay for collectors to fight each other, and the MC says the government doesn't care about that. The NPCs behind the collector start getting excited about the idea of seeing their idol duel and hope he wins against Lotus. Asks if it's okay for the collectors to fight each other, and MC says the government doesn't care about that. It's better than them conspiring in secret. Yet Lotus realizes that Ryerim doesn't seem interested at all in refusing the challenge, which actually makes MC happy. He looks at her and says she can accept if she wants. She didn't seem interested in avoiding the fight. Ryerim smiles and says that's great, that she would accept the duel with the handsome Casanova. The collector is excited, confident that victory is guaranteed, simply because Ryerim is ranked below him. There was nothing a rising rookie could do against him. A member of the Great Raishiad clan, smiling, he continues thinking about how he will easily put her in her place, practically drooling at the thought of taking her down right there. And the river whispers something in the girl's ear, and she tells the handsome boy that she won't duel with him now but in 3 days, which leaves the man a bit confused. Believing that she wouldn't improve anything in 3 days, he accepts her conditions while he walks away. He says they can use a location from the association for the battle, and that he will be waiting for her in 3 days, still holding his book. MC already knew he was from the Raisiade clan, but also knew exactly how he would crush that pride. The interviewer appears behind them, asking what the whole commission was about, and smiled. A disc that someone passed by there. She makes a huge disgusted face, and MC asks if she knows him, saying yes. She replies that he makes her uncomfortable. With his stares, it was clear that she wasn't affected by his ability either. The girl also explains that besides everything, there were rumors that he used the power of his clan to do bad things, asks what he did to them, and the river said that the man requested a duel with Ryerim, and they accepted. This shocks the girl. The news worried her since the guy was strong, but MC reassures her by saying that he has a plan to defeat him. It was just a matter of thinking about it. If the Sword Empress won a duel against him after the interview, it would become a big scoop. She asks if he was trying to take advantage of the situation, but the boy said he would be grateful if she could attract more media attention for them with that. Sighing, she said she had already realized he wasn't an ordinary person, but now he was proving to be even crazier than she thought. Anyway, She says she would do what he asked and tells them they will meet again another time, and he thanks MC for letting her participate in the duel, and he said he only did that because he is confident in her victory. She asks why he asked to postpone the duel for 3 days, and he responds that they need to make this event as big as possible to attract the media. Journalists began gathering in front of the office of Suriam wanting to interview Riram about the duel, and the situation was exhausting. The girl Gariam really managed to bring a lot of attention to them. The master of ceremonies knows that although Riram is recognized by the spirits, common people still did not know her. They needed this exposure, yet she seemed calm, just sitting and practicing her culture even amidst all the commotion about what she would do in the duel. She still had the potential to become even better than she was in her past life, so he could not allow her maximum potential to be held back from the MC's perspective. They needed her to become stronger than ever and transcend to her true peak. This battle was destined to help her grow even more, not just in strength but also in fame. The day of the duel finally arrived. We have the Colosseum where the battle between the protagonist and Jack took place. At least I think so. Snack vendors were already selling their products, and the arena, the stands began to fill with people eager to see the fight. It was evident that this battle was highly anticipated. The place was starting to get crowded, which even startled Suriam. And the river asks if she is nervous, and she yells at him. Impressed with the focused attention on this fight, everything was at stake. He was amazed at the media attention that Garyunga had garnered, but it was also plausible that it was thanks to the art collector. These battle events were not so common, so people got excited whenever one happened. Suriam starts to feel sick from nerves, and the boy asks if she wants to go to the bathroom. She yells at him, saying it's just a stomachache anyway. The place was crowded. Even members of major clans and famous collectors were present. The nerves were understandable. Lotto's comments that he doesn't seem nervous, but he denies it. He just wasn't showing it. This battle was not his. It belonged to the Empress of the Sword, and we see that although meditating, she also looked nervous. There were only 3 minutes left until the duel began. She opens her eyes in a contemplative state, and the river asks if she is ready, and Riram stands up and says yes. Although there is a hint of excitement in her voice, he gives a gentle smile, but in the next moment, punches the girl's head for no apparent reason. Crying, she asks why he did that. But he said he didn't hit her with the intention to hurt. He asks if she is less nervous now than before, and this seems to have triggered something in the girl. She realizes her nervousness has faded. Still, she complains to him, saying he should have warned her. But the MC replies that if he had, it wouldn't have had the same effect shouting. She says just wait until he gets angry. She will do the same, but soon after. She thanks him for being by her side. The battle was about to begin. The system orders the fighters to enter the arena and also informs that the divine spirits are excited about the fight. There were already 4,500 spectators watching the duel, and they were all cheering for the Sword Empress. Both were now in the arena. A field is generated around them. Trees start to appear, and they now find themselves in a place resembling a forest. The rules were as follows. The battle would end if one of them surrendered or became unable to fight. There would be monsters present that would grant them points when defeated, and each monster had a different point value. They had 3 hours to complete the duel. If there was no knockout within that time, the winner would be the one with the highest score. Killing was prohibited. Anyone who broke this rule would be punished according to the association's regulations. All the rules were explained with applause from the stands and spectators. The system announced that the battle could begin now. A massive explosion occurred the moment the match started, granting him 150 points. He seemed excited and full of energy for this duel. A spectator begins to cheer for him enthusiastically, while the other asks what the Sword Empress was doing. She was standing with her eyes closed, making the man wonder if she was already giving up even before the fight started. We quickly realize that the electric aura around her body begins to take shape. She was deeply focused. Opening her eyes, we now realize that the real battle was about to begin. She was finally ready. The artist looks back to see what happened and wonders about the sound he just heard. Something was coming in his direction before he could understand what was happening. Iharam was already in front of him, with her sword ready to slice him into sashimi. Even so, he was not weak and managed to block the attack, although it was clear that he struggled to do so. The hatred on his face was evident, and he thinks she is a brat for coming after him instead of the monsters. Right at the start of the battle, excited, the commentator notes how the battle has already begun with a confrontation between the two. Instead of a quest for points, an electric dragon is summoned by Ririn. She was not there to play. Her goal was very clear upon losing. The artist screams, asking how she underestimated him. At that moment, his aura also intensifies, turning red. The fight between them was absurdly intense. Their auras collided. It felt like 2 Super Saiyans were fighting, even being strong. The artist realizes he is being dominated by the Sword Empress. Her strength was overwhelming. Without losing her composure, Ririm struck with a vertical blow so powerful, and it made the ground beneath the artist sink several centimeters. The crowd was shocked by the magnitude of the strength. They knew she was strong, but this was far beyond their expectations. She thinks to herself that this was exactly what she wanted. the feeling of crushing someone who underestimated her. The artist's face was pale with fear. The feeling of unleashing all his power along with the freedom to do so was endlessly exhilarating. She makes a horizontal strike that cuts everything around them. The forest is flattened in an instant, but the artist has not been cut. A thin line of blood runs across his face. He had been hit, but was still standing and not seriously injured. Terrified, he touches his face, still not believing he had really been hit finally. Losing his patience, he charges at the girl, having completely lost his mind, because her beautiful face was injured, and yells at her with just one movement. We see a sword flying into the air, spinning at high speed. Rierim had disarmed the boy with her sword. Now he only had the other blade in hand, advancing before he could react. She drives her knee directly into the bridge of his nose, breaking it instantly. The boy falls backward, blood gushing from his face, and he is already unconscious. The girls in the stands are completely shocked. Seeing their idol being defeated so easily, he regains consciousness just before completely passing out. He returns to the fight and begins to think that he cannot lose to a low-level collector, analyzing his situation. He thinks he needs to calm down, otherwise, he won't be able to read her attacks and respond appropriately. He had to react the right way. Hiron charges again for another attack, and the artist finally finds an opening quick. He moves to counterattack, but with a graceful movement, Hiron dodges, catching him by surprise and sliding behind him. Curious, he realizes she was just playing with him, so he spins his foot to keep her in sight, jumping in her direction. He shouts that he won't let this slide, but with just one punch, Hiram knocks him out again. Surium and Urium watch the scene horrified. The boy was being mercilessly crushed by the Sword Empress. Trembling, and with his face completely destroyed, he starts to stutter that he wants to give up, but she delivers another punch. Jiram was deliberately preventing him from surrendering and continued to beat him with conviction. The girls began to completely lose their admiration for the artist once he was easily subdued by another collector. Someone from the stands shouts, asking why they weren't interrupting the fight, but Eerie wasn't letting him declare surrender, so they couldn't stop ending her sequence of blows. She raises her arms for a final strike, so strong that it explodes the entire area where the two were. As the dust begins to settle, she observes the scene, and we see that the boy was completely defeated and unconscious. Impressed, the announcer finally declares the battle over and crowns Raren the Sword Empress. As the champion of the duel, the battlefield is finally deactivated and they return to the Colosseum arena. Argela was incredulous, and at the same time disgusted by everything she had just witnessed. Probably all this confusion was caused by her. Realizing that Raren showed her true strength at that moment made her even more irritated, and she understood that it was Mac who gave that order to her. All she wanted now was to tear Yuri apart, but she couldn't act thoughtlessly. An opportunity would come soon, meeting up with the others. Riorinho is greeted by Suri, who asks if she is okay, extremely happy for her friend's victory. She praises her performance, touched by everything she had seen, and the girl thanks her for the kind words. The Mac calls her, saying that she was impressive, which puts her on cloud 9. Again, she becomes increasingly embarrassed, and you know the rule with the maximum joy possible. She thanks the MC for the support. Someone bangs on the table angrily, saying that things cannot continue like this. The scene changes and we see a meeting room where people are shouting that they can't keep losing mental domains because of the Sword Empress. Another person asks what they can do, but a third person says they are being too emotional. His name is the leader. He said that even if he was there against his will, he should focus on the meeting, but Goku doesn't seem very interested in that. Apparently, he also thinks that mental domains shouldn't be kept open, just like the Empress and the MC believe. Back to Suri's office. She comments how amazing it was that Ririm was the talk of the moment. Everyone was talking about her. While the two were excitedly discussing the next foods they would buy with their money, the MC was lost in thought. He notices and asks what he was thinking. The MC finally said he made a decision, but the girls still seem confused, and Ririm wants to recruit a new collector, completely challenging their expectations and making them scream in shock, and he starts to cry, saying he is being abandoned. The MC approaches her, who is sobbing on the couch, and asks when he abandoned her, but she screams that he lied, saying he only needed her. He starts to explain that it can't be just the two of them, clearing mental domains forever. Things would get more difficult soon. It wasn't urgent yet, since they could both still handle the domains, but that would change soon and they needed to prepare. Besides, now that his position was about to rise, wouldn't it be great to have a junior just for her? That definitely caught the girl's attention. Her attitude quickly changes and she says there's no way to avoid it. She has to let it go and show the generosity of a veteran, now visibly excited. Suri asks if the MC had someone in mind, and he replies that he hadn't thought of anyone yet. That wasn't entirely true. Remembering his past life, he could think of other collectors known as the Miraculous Generation. Lodo suggests he use his knowledge of the future to find someone. He said he has many candidates, but it's still not the right moment. Some still hadn't awakened, and finding an unknown person could be more difficult than expected. The MC complains about that, then remembers there will be a competition tomorrow. That would be a good opportunity to find a hidden talent, very likely. There would be someone interesting in that competition who wouldn't become famous in his future. A system window appears for the MC, catching his attention and interrupting his thoughts. Someone unidentified was trying to start a video call with the MC. He decides to see who is someone with a demonic appearance appearing at the window, asking if the protagonist can hear her. When he confirms, she says she heard that he was recently promoted to senior. She finds the protagonist's historical reaction strange and says she thought he would react differently but congratulates him. Suri asks who she is, but he doesn't know. Irritated, he asks them to step back so he can have a bit more privacy. Carefully, he notices the horns on the girl's head. He finally remembers that it was that horned guy he saw during the initiation ceremony. The new accountants. This makes the girl furious and she says she is not a guy. Her name is Alicia. He thinks to himself that she actually looks really pretty now but says nothing, and asks how her career as an accountant has been. Excited, she said she received help from the veterans in her department and is currently working in a world called Altalon. The ticket girl is already convinced that she beat him because she reached 500 spectators in her library and praises her collector. Mac asks if he is an evil noble, and she asks how he knew that, and the river gives a detailed description and surprises the other ticket girl. He is pleased to have guessed her collector's story, and realizes that she chose an interesting archetype, but she wants to talk about something else. She asks if he saw one of the accountants. Recently, the master of ceremonies said he hadn't checked in a while, and she told him to take a look because something interesting happened without giving further explanations. She said she was busy and ended the call, leaving him curious about what was strange in the forum. He opens the forum window to check the posts and sees something that scares him. There was a discussion about an accountant who tried to copy Mac, giving up his blessing and fighting alongside the collector but ended up being eliminated for it. Opening the linked video in the forum, he watches the scene of his end. He had tried to abandon the collector, but still did not survive. Watching the video with him, Lotus comments that she didn't think it was real, but is impressed to see that footage. Several people commented on how irresponsible it was to give up a blessing, but Max sees this as something good. It brought him more attention. Anyway, many accountants started giving up their blessings trying to imitate him. Latos asks if this worries him. Instead, he thinks it would be an interesting story. An accountant who gave up his protective blessing and fought because of it the next day. We see Riram looking disappointed, asking Ryam if he really had to go alone. He said yes. There were still many reporters in front of their office because of her duel, and he needed to deal with it as quickly as possible, asking her to understand. He activates his invisibility skill and says he will be back as soon as he finishes. The boy passes through the crowd without problems, while reporters wonder when they will finally leave. Arriving at the graduation ceremony location, the collectors, we see many people coming in and out of the place. Lotus is shocked by the crowd, and the Mick comments that it is possible that people from the main clans were there to recruit new members. The Sword asks if he will be able to find someone competent. In this place, the main clans surely already have information that he does not possess. The Mac explains that he is not necessarily looking for the best among the collectors. After all, Reirinho was far from that. At first, he understood that those with the highest rank were often more talented, but there were still hidden potentials that only he could see and awaken. Lotus did not have that ability, but she ends up accepting his explanation, and they start looking for a collector with great potential. The whole day passes. Lotus is already tired of searching alongside the Mac, but still seems to have found no one really interesting to call. All the collectors he saw were very common. He hoped to find someone with at least gold level potential. Something catches his attention and makes him run off, startling Lotus, who is left behind. The Sword tries to run after him and even calls his name, but he doesn't hear and runs until he turns the corner, and Reirinho seems stunned, wondering if he saw wrong. Reaching someone, he shouts, asking for a second of her time looking at her. The girl he called is left speechless. She turns, but she doesn't seem very happy. To have to give attention to the protagonist, what he sees above her is simply surprising: 3 books of various colors, like a rainbow. And what I couldn't react, normally a person only has 1 book, but she had 3. This could mean many things, but what exactly? She turns to leave again, but the Mac calls her once more, getting closer to her. The Mac introduces himself and asks her name, but she tells him to go away or she will eliminate him right there. The boy seems not to hear her, as he is extremely excited to meet someone with such strong power potential as hers, but once he introduces himself to her as a cashier and says he is from the Baikoa office. She then asks what he wants from her, and the boy replies that he would like to make a great offer. Uninterested in the offer, she turns to leave, saying that she is busy and doesn't want him to bother her. But he puts a hand on her shoulder, just giving her a look to face the Mac. She warns him that if he doesn't let her go, she will end his life, and Reirinho finally gives up and lets the girl go. Apparently, he wouldn't get anything from her. Lotus arrives and asks if he was there because of that girl. She must be very talented, or someone he met from the future was the chosen one. The Master of Ceremonies replies that he doesn't know her, but he thinks she must have been famous in her past life. It was strange that she was a complete unknown. Giving up for now, he tells Lotus that they should go home, but that he will meet her again. Lotus asks how he will do that if he doesn't even know her name, showing that he has one of her books in hand. He tells her not to worry. He knew he would meet her again soon. Back at the office, the MC asks Sorium to find someone named Kwan. A girl who recently graduated asks if that is the person he wants to recruit. He confirms that yes, it is. He had thought he could find her just by using the book he got. But one book wasn't enough. Suddenly, appearing behind the protagonist, Ririn asks if that was the name of a woman, and he replies that yes, it was a devastated woman. She starts to cry and throws herself on the floor out of jealousy, but the MC explains that he didn't choose her because she was a woman. Ririn doesn't want to hear it. Sorium finally finds her but is shocked by the information she discovered. The MC asks if there was a problem. She explains that the girl graduated near the bottom of her class, and even though she had great combat skills, she was terrible at teamwork. Apparently, she even got into a fight at school and almost got expelled, so she barely graduated. She was really powerful, strong enough to defeat several high-ranking students, but because of her personality, no one wanted to hire her. Sorium confirms with the MC if this is really the person he wants to recruit, and he answers yes without hesitation. All those books about her were proof that she could become even stronger than Kang Hyrim. Poor Hyrim, she is going to be replaced. Ryan leaves for a moment, and Sorium asks if he is going to hire her now, but he says no, not yet. In fact, he was leaving because he needed to go somewhere to meet someone. Upon arriving at the location, we see a sign that says, "Waiting at the door, street food." He finds the name of the restaurant strange but decides to go in. The name becomes less strange when you know who the owner of the place is. The door opens, and a woman looks to see who it is. She welcomes the MC and asks if he wants a table for one, but he simply asks if she is Choy Doyum's mother, a bit surprised. She asks how he knows her Choy Doyum, but he replies that he is the one who contacted her some time ago. Sitting at the table, she then asks if the MC knows where her son is, but he replies that no, he doesn't know where he is but knows his name. That must be proof that he is alive, right? The MC quickly responds, yes, Doyum is alive. Hearing this news brings her great relief and emotion. It was a big comfort for her pain. She asks the name of the MC, calling him Salvador, but he asks her not to call him something as heavy as Salvador. And the storyteller explains that he is just a curious storyteller about Doyum's family, and his mother asks how he knows her son. The boy replies that storytellers work in various worlds and hear stories from different dimensions and planets. The truth is that the MC didn't know what Choy Doyum was doing. In the other dimension, he only knows that the boy is alive and will return in the end. This makes him remember how he looked, like a sad person when he returned, but his personality ended up twisting afterward. Maybe it happened because his mother had died in that reality, which made him hate everything that had happened and the impending destruction of Earth. Interrupting the protagonist's thoughts, his mother said he had always been mature for his age. He was born without a father, but that never bothered him. Maybe that's why she was always so apologetic with him. In the end, he was just a child who wanted to be one, but she couldn't do anything for him on the day he disappeared. It was as if her world had completely collapsed. Losing him and feeling powerless was devastating. She said if he is really alive, maybe he is better in that other world than with a poor mother, but the MC doesn't let her finish. Firmly, he says she can feel guilty for his disappearance, but he is definitely striving to return to his mother. He said the boy is alive, but never said he is happy where he is and trusts that she understands what he means by that. Jeremiah's master knew that even with power, fame, and fortune in the other dimension, he chose to return to Earth not for greatness. His motives were much simpler than anything else. He just wants to reunite with his family when he returns. Emotional, Choy Doyun's mother agrees with the MC and says he is right. In the end, they were family, and her son definitely wanted to see her again. As much as she wanted to see him, she thanks the MC for everything, wiping her tears. She says the boy seems to know her son very, very well, but he replies that he only heard about him from other people. Understanding the situation, she said she just thought her son had found a good friend. Mothers really have great instincts, thinks the protagonist. The woman was about to offer him dinner when someone enters the restaurant screaming, interrupting the conversation. 3 very strong-looking men appear, saying they had already told her to close the restaurant before, but she didn't obey. Standing up, Doyum's mother asks who they think they are to say that, but they start to subtly threaten her. She asks them to leave, saying she had a customer there, but they mock her, and they say that no one would want to eat in that place. The discussion starts to intensify, but the protagonist still hasn't done anything. He simply observes everything in silence, thinking out loud. He said he really didn't want to do anything good for that guy, but helping his mother wouldn't hurt, which irritates one of the men. Furious, he tries to punch the protagonist, shouting for him to go away already. The scene changes to outside Doyum's mother's restaurant, and in the next moment, the 3 men are thrown outside. They scream in pain with broken arms and legs, while the MC also comes out of the shop towards them. In panic, one of them desperately screams that a collector cannot touch civilians, but the MC says that this threat is meaningless. He is not a collector, and the river drags the three away from the restaurant, commenting on how people like him always say the same things like robots. The four arrive at a deserted alley, and the MC looks at them lying on the ground and asks where their office is, but they refuse to speak. They even think that the MC came to apologize for hurting them, but all he wants is to resolve the problem at its root. He grabs one of their books and while reading the information discovers the location of the hideout, leaving them in panic. One of them screams, asking who sent him to mess with them. But the MC said he won't do anything else against them. He has something else in mind. His plan was to go to their hideout, create chaos, and then say that they gave up the location so easily. They still try to threaten the MC again, but he is not intimidated and starts to walk away from them to the point that they start to insult him. The MC then turns to the three and says he loves being called a bastard. What a strange fetish. Yuri-1 comes out of the alley. He spits an inscription of silence there, so that no one else can hear their screams and insults back at the restaurant. Doyum's mother asks if he is okay, but the MC said he already dealt with them. It was easy for him. After all, he is a storyteller. He also writes a seal to prevent intruders from entering, and says they won't come back. She could rest easy upon leaving. He says goodbye to her, and the woman thanks him for everything he did for her today. The protagonist's intention was to go to the bandits' hideout and take care of another task he had in mind. Hurried steps, and people screaming that there was an enemy nearby, asking who the bastard was that was doing this. And the river was still, while everyone who tried to attack him was lying on the ground like bags of trash. Several other men were still standing, and one of them asked how he found that place. He replied that one of their subordinates told him, running towards the MC with a baseball bat. He screams, asking how the kid dared to show up there. But the river doesn't even blink. In the next moment, he dodges the thug's blow that hits the ground so hard it explodes. Mac realizes that guy was a collector and concludes that someone bigger must be behind them, someone rich enough to have a collector working for them. Excited, Rio says he just caught a really big fish. Someone shouts to eliminate the protagonist, and all the thugs rush at him together. The protagonist quickly counterattacks and takes down one with just a kick, leaving the others afraid of his strength. Another one pulls a knife, cursing at the protagonist, and advances to try to cut him effortlessly, and Rio grabs the blade with one hand. It felt more like holding a broomstick than a sharp weapon. The man is surprised and asks how he didn't cut himself doing that. Taking his knife, we see that Rio used the night combat skill that enhanced his physical abilities and defense. He punches the man right in the face, instantly knocking him down. The thug is launched backward with the impact, while the others just watch the scene. Rio then turns to the rest that are still standing and gestures with one hand for them to come to him at once. A middle-aged man with a cut on his face is trembling with fear while holding a metal briefcase. All the other thugs have already been defeated. One had turned into a human piña colada right there. The man asks who Mac is, saying that collectors are not allowed to hurt civilians, but Rio responds that he is not the call first to say that today. Terrified, the man starts to think that the protagonist is a known killer collector. Assuming someone sent him to kill him, he desperately screams that he will give all his belongings to Urim. He just wants to be spared. The Master of Ceremonies is confused but decides to play along. Urim crosses her arms and tells the man to hand over the belongings. He opens his briefcase and shows what's inside. Besides money, there's a notebook that immediately catches the Master of Ceremonies' attention, and he picks it up. Inside, he finds evidence that two major clans were collaborating with these criminals. Hanwoo, who had expelled Soryu from the clan, and an even bigger one, the Twilight Curtain clan. Most of the collectors from that clan were part of the Pentagram Department. This meant their involvement too. Why the hell would that clan be involved in real estate related to collectors in that sector? They were incredibly suspicious. Suddenly, the protagonist has an idea. Perhaps the goal was a mental domain in that area they were trying to hide. A mental domain that even the government didn't know about, and a clan trying to keep it secret to monopolize it. The Master of Ceremonies interrupts his own thoughts and tells the man to open the safe behind him, but the man refuses, terrified, and Rio knew that the refusal only confirmed that whatever was in that safe was really important, and he needed to see him use his system to teleport the vault to his library, causing the thug to fall backward in shock from his sudden terrifying disappearance. The man asks where the vault went, but the Master of Ceremonies changes the subject, saying he couldn't leave the thug standing. While the others were unconscious, he turns to the Master of Ceremonies, confused, and asks what he said, but with just one punch, the thug is knocked out in the observation room, and the river is staring intently at the vault he brought from those thugs. It didn't seem like he had enough strength to open the object without causing major damage, so he starts considering other options. Remembering his engraving skill, he begins to completely alter the vault's configuration to reduce its security to 0, and in just a few seconds, the vault opens by itself, and inside there is a notebook titled Top Secret. Reading its contents, the character thinks this is much bigger than he expected and wonders how he can use this information. The three idiots who were beaten by Mac in the previous chapter are on their knees, begging the boss for forgiveness for what happened, yelling at them. The boss says that If they hadn't revealed the location of the hideout, that lunatic wouldn't have gone there and eliminated everyone. A group of 3 men arrives at the gang's hideout, and this alarms the boss and the superintendent, saying he heard the news. He asks if it's true that their most sensitive information leaked because of an idiot. The gang leader tries to deny it. Quickly trying to explain, he said the master of ceremonies took the vault, but was confident he wouldn't be able to open it because it had several layers of security. Approaching the 3 idiots, the superintendent asks if they are the bastards who leaked the location, and the boss confirms that they are. He says he understands and makes a small gesture with one of his hands. Blood splatters everywhere, and the idiots' heads are separated from their bodies. They were no longer alive, and the boss is horrified. Upon leaving, the superintendent said he would spare the boss's life since it was his first mistake, and the man thanks him. Before actually leaving, he asks if the boss remembers the intruder's face. The boss said yes and begins trying to describe him to the other man. He tries to remember, but his memory is very hazy. He can't describe the man's face to the superintendent. Realizing what happened, the superintendent explains that the intruder is very skilled and blocked his memories. The vault would have been easy for him too. It was time to close all the offices in that area. If anyone reveals what happened today, they will show up again. The superintendent was furious at the audacity of those who dared to mess so audaciously with the Twilight Curtain. He would do. The intruder pays the silent scene, and we see Lotus's face filled with admiration. They were in front of the Celestial Body Inc., and she said it's the first time she's there seeing 2 armed soldiers. She asks if they are counters, like the Master of Ceremonies, but he said they are just guardians and different from him. Their armors grant them incredible power to fight against enemies. It was like powerful armor. Depending on the rank, the level of armor varied. He was explaining all this to White Lotus when something happened. A pair of yellow and frightening eyes fixed on the protagonist, and he felt the weight of the gaze looking up. He tries to understand what happened, but he can't see anything and wonders who could be looking in that direction. The vote catches his attention. The promotion ceremony is about to begin, and they can't be late, and he agrees. We see the exterior of Celestial Body Inc. building for a moment, then the smile of a very old man who recognizes Yuri. He looks like a villain and is very interested in the MC. Someone as fun as him hadn't appeared in the company for a long time. The eyes that looked up and the burning desire within them made him excited. This old man just hopes the boy can show an interesting enough story to ignite the mixed world. At that moment, the boy feels chills and mentally comments to Lotus. She asks if he is nervous, and he mentions the gaze he felt before. She said it wasn't just a feeling. She also noticed that strange gaze when the MC looked up. Although she hadn't said anything at the time, this surprises the MC. It wasn't just a strange feeling, and he starts to think about who could have cast that gaze on him. His thoughts fixate on one of the first counters, the CEO of Celestial Body Inc. Junior Anglapute, or at least that's what he managed to read. He begins to worry that this guy could one day be his opponent, but ends up pushing that thought out of his mind for now. The best option he had was simply to ignore him. If it really was the case, this man would be too powerful for the protagonist. Someone catches the MC's attention, telling him to hurry. Lotus was calling Artiz, saying that the promotion ceremony was about to start on stage. There were 2 counters along with the protagonist, and someone was asking the audience to applaud them for their achievement. Some already recognized the Master of Ceremonies, especially for having renounced his blessing and still managed to get a promotion in record time. Almost all the counters were looking at Riem, and he was aware of it. Was he already becoming a target of potential envy? Everyone there seemed interested in him, including the CEO of the company. It would have been impossible for his old self. The truth is, he was satisfied with this new life, and wanted to keep advancing, working even harder than before. The ceremony ends quickly, which frustrates Lotus a bit because of how the promotion happened so fast. But the Master of Ceremonies was already expecting this and wanted to leave. Lotus complains, asking why he wants to leave so quickly. But he simply didn't want to stick around long enough for the departments to try to recruit him. The sword asks if he had any place to run off to, and we see that he was heading back to that old man's library. Confused, Lotus asks what kind of boring place that was. He arrives at the location where the old man was, who at first does not recognize him, and asks who he is, quickly realizing who it was. He greets the MC and says it's been a month since they last saw each other. The MC asks how he has been. He replies that he heard the guy was promoted. This makes him feel embarrassed. Changing the subject, the old man comments that the reason for his visit must be because he wanted him to fulfill the promise he once made to the MC, and the old man said he doesn't want to keep calling MC, and the old man said he doesn't want to keep calling him old forever, and he agrees. Gallius. His name was Gallius, and this shocks the MC. That was none other than the guardian of the Dragon King. Surprise. Lotus asks who he was since she didn't even recognize the name, and the old man explains that there are many stories in the mixed world and asks if she has ever heard of the Great Force, Divine Draconic. It was the power of divine spirits of dragons that gathered many dragons of different species, and among them were 7 of the most powerful. They were known as the Dragon Kings, naturally powerful by nature. They were strong from birth and only got stronger as they aged among all species. They were the most suited for the title of king. Unfortunately, among them was one who was weak from birth, the White Dragon King Sharuriel, who became the guardian of the history of the Dragon King unlike the others, who were born soldiers like kings. The fact that this dragon was born physically and mentally weak was already considered a sin. He was exiled from his group because of this, but with great effort, he eventually reached the Dragon King stage with the help of a storyteller. This became a shameful event for the dragons, who despised storytellers because they never fought and just observed everything. The difference was that this particular storyteller did the unthinkable. He led the dragon, the protagonist of his story, to the title of king. This impressive feat earned that storyteller the title of guardian of the Dragon King, and the name of that storyteller was Galeus. The old man becomes shy for being recognized and says that this is a thing of the past, but the MC asks why someone as famous as he would be in such a forgotten place, smiling. The old man gives a very simple answer. He was there by choice because those who run incessantly without rest end up going crazy. And the river asks if he should work there. When he retires, the old man asks if he is serious, but the MC was just joking. Laughing, the old man said it was a silly question to ask someone who is still in the middle of the race, and that catches the boy's attention. He said that the old man could still keep running too, and that leaves him a bit confused. Motivationally, the Master of Ceremonies says that age doesn't matter. The moment you decide to do something that ignites a passion, that is your best moment. This leaves Galeas a bit thoughtful. The words of the Master of Ceremonies clearly touched a sensitive point for him. A system window appears, informing that there are only 10 minutes left until the end of the promotion ceremony countdown. Realizing the situation, Galeas says it's time to go back. He had spent too much time with the old man. The Master of Ceremonies agrees but says he will come back. This makes the old man happy. He wanted to have more conversations like that with the protagonist in the future, and the river seemed really impressed. Being in front of someone so important seemed like a great friendship was forming while trying to discreetly step back. Lotos and the MC scan the area looking for the station, so they can return to land without attracting attention. It was at least funny to see someone who loved attention so much trying to go unnoticed, but something puts them on alert. In the next moment, a very tall woman with red hair appears in front of the MC. Startling him for a second, she was wearing an eye patch over her left eye. She asked if he had just come out of the recording room. She seemed quite serious. A bit annoyed to find attendants still in the room, he admits that he was inside. But when he looks up, he's startled. The woman had a golden book above her head, which makes the MC wonder if she is the head of some department. Curious, she asks if he had a good relationship with the old man in the room, and he says yes, he even knows his name. This impresses her quickly, and she realizes that he might be the famous King Yuri, and asks if it is really him. With the old man in the room and he says yes, he even knows his name, which impresses her. She quickly realizes he might be the famous King Yuri and asks if it's really him, to which the boy confirms it, leaving her extremely excited like a child thrilled to meet her idol. And she finally introduces herself as Celestina. The MC seemed fascinating to her, and she asks if the rumors about him having given up his blessing to fight alongside his collector were true. After confirming that it's true, she gives the Mac a slap on the head, even more excited to see such a brave counter. Something rare nowadays after exchanging introductions. She said it's great to meet him and invites him to her department, but he said it's the storytelling office. Laughing, she said she invited him because she is also part of storytelling. Specifically from the Celestial Beings Department, the Master of Ceremonies had heard of them, a department that only had the elite of the counters, a place where few were recruited as all were of high rank. It was quite uncommon to have such a department within the storytelling office, where size is usually a display of power, and the river asks why she invited him to such an exclusive department. Her answer is simple: because I am the head of it, and you are not an ordinary counter. The offer was tempting, fewer restrictions, and a perfect fit for him. But after a moment, the river refused. He decided he wouldn't join any department, he would do everything on his own. Celestina wasn't annoyed, instead she turned her back and said, "You passed." She now understood why the old man liked him. He had a passion that other counters didn't have. He thanked her. She asked if making the offer again would change his mind. "No," he said, "that doesn't mean we can't work together." Celestina was intrigued, and the Ryan proposed working as a freelancer for her department. She admitted that if someone else made such a bold claim, they would get beaten up, but coming from him it seemed fun and was a good idea. Of course, she wouldn't help him for free. Every favor must be repaid, she stated. He completely agreed. As he left to meet the old man, she gave him one last piece of advice. "If you know the Pentagram Department, be careful. They won't let someone like you be at peace." And the river thanked her for the warning. He was already on high alert. In fact, it was better that way, because his ultimate goal was to destroy them completely. If you like this recap, don't forget to like the channel and subscribe, so you don't miss future videos. Well folks, this is the end of the video. If you liked it, comment for the next part, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.